Good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the second special meeting of the Board of Directors of School Administrative District number 52. We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ashley.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first item on the agenda is to act on the minutes, and you'll see highlighted in red that we're going to revisit the 19th regular meeting minutes from May 30th. I put out an email for why that's the case. Frankly, going through the minutes from last meeting, looking at the policies as we amended them, there were many amendments to amendments, and unfortunately, I think as well as Gabby's been doing, filling in for Teresa, there were some errors on that May 30.
And that was actually Teresa
Was
and
it
me.
Teresa and you?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we take responsibility. Gabby's
All right, sorry.
responsible for the next one.
Didn't even need to reference you. Didn't even need to reference
No,
you,
it's
Gabby.
totally okay.
All right.
She's off the hook on that
She
one.
has broad shoulders.
Yeah. But because we had approved the May 30 minutes by unanimous consent, act of essentially rescinding our approval of those minutes and to insert these new revised minutes requires a 2/3 vote. So hopefully, on my urging in emails, you've all had a chance to review these, and hopefully, if you have any comments or thoughts about the revised minutes, you could put them forth now. Seeing none, are we ready to take a vote? All those in favor of striking the prior minutes?
Do we need a
go ahead.
motion first?
We can, if we want to make it perfectly official, I think that's worth it. Is there a motion to rescind the prior May 30th minutes and replace with the shown revised May 30th minutes? Made by Anthony, is there a second? Crystal, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Is, I believe, unanimous. Then moving on to the 20th regular meeting, which was June 13th, our last meeting. Again, Carrie and I had pawed through these pretty well as part of this revision process. But are there any thoughts offered for June 13th? Crystal?
Can we just have it reflected that Bree was participating remotely, I think, on the members present piece? Just, she was here, but not physically here.
Any other thoughts or comments on the minutes from June 13th? Anthony?
So I don't know if this needs a motion, but on 11.1, the second paragraph, I think it should note that we deviated from parliamentary procedure with that motion. So I would amend it to say, in deviation from parliamentary procedure, comma, a motion was made.
I will let that, I think you should put that into a motion to add that language. I'm not so sure it's critical, but if you want to get that noted in there, I would make a motion to do so.
So moved.
Is there a second to that? Seconded by Kyle. So that's discussion.
Can I get the exact wording you would like, please?
You want the exact-
In deviation from parliamentary procedure, comma.
Go ahead.
No problem with it, but that particular statement makes it sound like it was done on purpose when it wasn't. So I have no problem in mentioning that the action was not appropriate parliamentary procedure because we needed the appropriate, the forfeits or whatever it was, preface. which it was then remedied. So I have no problem with putting in a sentence, but that particular sentence seems a little too, like we did it on purpose, which we didn't. That's my only concern with the sentence, is that we chose to go that way instead of not, and then we're caught, which.
Go ahead.
I don't, I mean, my feeling is that it's neutral language. It just says, this is how it happened, you know, like, this is what it is. I'm not sure how to state it otherwise.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Can you clarify, so you want that before 11.1?
No, so the
Second
second
motion.
paragraph.
So are you saying that, I'm just looking for clarification. So are you saying that, what I'm hearing from Peter is that the going into executive session before a 3/5 vote was deviating from parliamentary procedure? What you're saying is that the second vote that we took was deviating from
Correct,
parliamentary procedure?
correct. The motion made by Crystal Barris was in deviation from parliamentary procedure.
Can you explain what you feel like parliamentary procedure would have been?
So to reconsider a motion requires someone on the majority, the winning side of the previous vote to make that motion. Crystal was not on that side.
How so? She was part of the 5-4 majority.
Yeah.
It was part of the reconsideration.
It's the side that wins the.
So you're saying that could have only been made by the majority, the 4 of that vote?
It could have, right.
People who voted no.
No.
Sorry.
I don't know.
I understand where you're coming from, because I remember seeing it, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Peter.
I remember, back when Ike used to do town meeting, this would come up, because he was quite a stickler at times. And it was you have to be, for a motion to be rescinded, the only people that can rescind a motion are the people who voted in favor of the motion. You can't, if you voted against the motion, you can't ask to have the motion rescinded. It's only the people who voted in favor of the motion can rescind a motion, if I'm not mistaken. Because otherwise, if you always lost the motion, if you were part of the group that always lost the motion, you would always be looking to rescind it. So I'm trying to go back to about 5 town
Right,
meetings
but-
ago with Ike here, so I'm getting to work in here.
But we didn't lose that motion.
But she was on the side, Crystal.
It was a 3/5.
But the initial motion that we're coming in lieu, the initial motion that we're talking about.
Yes.
That was done mistakenly.
Yes,
And then, so we're coming back to reconsider it.
right.
So if that's where you're talking, the mistake was made, the winning motion that was done,
No. So the mistake was made in that the motion to reconsider and revote on going into executive session
yeah.
that motion should have been made by myself, Alex, Ashley, or Kyle.
Why?
Because we were the ones who actually won the first vote.
You lost the first vote.
No, we didn't.
It was 5-4.
Okay.
But it required a 3/5.
I'm going to pull the reins back on this again real quick,
Yeah.
okay? Because I want to let other people in on
Yeah,
this.
sorry.
Go ahead, Bree.
So, even though I wasn't here in body, what I heard and understood from that was, we voted, 5 wanted to go into executive session, 4 did not, so we left the room and went in, and then Joe came back in and said, sorry, we actually need to have the 3/5, which going 5-4 was not the accurate numbers, so we need to come back out. Because I think none of us were aware. We all assumed that 5 won, so we go back in. So I think, Anthony, when we talk about trying to add that extra line in, I don't know that it was, again, I agree with Peter, it wasn't done intentionally. None of us were necessarily aware that we needed to have 3/5. We were thinking, the majority was 5, let's go in. So coming back out, if what I'm hearing you say, Anthony, that winning side would be the 5 who said, yes, let's go into executive session. There was nothing else in between.
No,
I would like just to step in just for a second and say, I don't think this is something that necessarily needs to be reflected in the minutes. And we haven't even got to adjustments to the agenda yet,
Right.
okay? Yeah, but I want to highlight that I intend to make an adjustment to the agenda that is going to place a motion to censure the chair of this board on the floor for that action. And I think because we're already into it, I guess I intend to put that immediately on the heels of these minutes. So I'd like to try to resolve these minutes, and then we can talk about that particular issue in more detail if folks so desire. Okay?
Yep.
So, is there anyone who wants to continue to discuss the minutes?
Well, we have the motion on the table right now,
Yes.
which is for the current sentence.
Correct. So is there anyone who wants to continue to discuss that now? All right. So we'll put it to a vote whether Anthony's statement, which someone want to remind us exactly what that says?
At the beginning of the second paragraph, the second motion, in deviation from parliamentary procedure.
So all
The
folks
rest of the motion.
in favor of adding that language to the minutes, please raise your hand. There's 2. All folks against? That is 1, 2, 3. Jamie? 4, 5, 6, and you're abstaining?
Yeah, I'm just not familiar enough with that.
Okay.
So 5 no? No, 8, 6.
Can we just do hands one more time for the noes, please? I'm sorry.
Shostak and Cutter
For nose?
are yes.
Nose.
Sorry,
Nose.
nose, okay.
No, Shostak and Cutter are yeses.
Are yeses,
Yes.
yep,
And
yep,
the
yep.
noes?
1, 2, 3,
Peter, Joe.
4, 5, 6.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And-
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the minutes are approved, unedited. Yeah.
What about Crystal's?
No, sorry, with Crystal's, correct. Crystal had a suggestion to note
Remote.
Bree's
Mhm.
remote presence.
got it.
I don't think that was controversial enough to vote on, but if folks feel that it is.
Think about it.
I deserve a vote, she says. I deserve one.
Okay. So like I was just saying, one of the adjustments to the agenda tonight, which is not on here, is a motion that I'd like to put on the floor, which is a motion to censure the chair of the MSAD52 Board of Directors associated with actions taken on June 13th when calling for votes associated with item 11.1. A motion to enter into an executive session for consultation with legal counsel concerning policies and duties of the board pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056E, specifically that the chair's conduct was not in accordance with policy BCA, school board member ethics, paragraph G. Is there a second to that? Kyle. So, we're going to get into discussion about this. Since this is a motion that I made, I'd like to make a statement, but since it is also a censure of me, I am going to turn over discussion and voting to our vice chair, and I will be here if you would like to ask questions, but otherwise will not be participating in the discussion or voting. So my statement, essentially, I think we've already kind of got into this a bit, talking about the minutes, but I received multiple email requests that I be censured for this action. There was also one particular member of the board that characterized it highly unorthodox and was frustrated in that email that was sent to me. I'm going to tell you right now that I do not always have a perfect execution of Robert's rules here, and I think, fortunately, I don't believe our policy requires that. Okay, had I been perfect, we would have had a perfect reconsideration. Motion to reconsider and gotten a second. I thought in the moment we had done everything we needed to do. As you heard explained a few minutes ago, there is some objection to how that was handled. Certainly, in the moment, I just wanted to explain to everyone what was going on, why we were not entering executive session, highlighting that we could still do it if folks are willing to do so. I do not believe that Robert's Rules of Order are something that should get in the way of us carrying out our duties or business. And I certainly think the actions we took were fully what the board had wanted to do. It was an 8-to-1 vote to do so. I just want to highlight school board member ethics, paragraph G. It says, as board members, I will make decisions openly after all the facts bearing on a question have been presented and discussed. Once a decision has been made by the majority of the board, I will abide by that decision. If I seek a change in the board's position, I will do so openly and in accordance with parliamentary procedure. I want to highlight a couple of points. The first statement, once a decision has been made by a majority of the board, I will abide by that decision. And I want to highlight that 2 votes of the board were taken on May 30th to consult with legal counsel related to policy IJJC. One of those votes was 5-4, the other was 8-1. Those votes were wills of the board to consult with legal counsel. The executive session was scheduled specifically for that purpose, and my desire to reconsider the vote on the executive session was motivated by my desire to make sure we fulfill those interests and votes of the board. Okay? It was certainly not in any way trying to circumvent our policy, procedures, or the will of the board. The other point I want to make is I will make decisions openly after all the facts bearing on a question have been presented and discussed. I think most of us thought that the initial vote, 5-4, was adequate to go into executive session. No one protested, we all got up and went. But then, once we learned that a 3/5 vote was required, we reconvened an open meeting, I explained the situation. This was apparently new information to everyone. It may have also been new information that executive session was the only way we were going to consult with legal counsel. Okay, so it was with this new information that we reconsidered that vote. And this was all done in the open. It was a completely voluntary request. There was no coercion. So, again, I'm here if folks want to ask me questions. However, at this point, I will hand it over to our vice chair until the motion is discussed and disposed.
Thank you, Joe. So the motion on the floor is a censorship of the chair in regards solely to the, oh, here it is here. Solely in regards to going into, or actually completing the first part of that where we had a non-3/5 vote. I do believe this motion has nothing to do with the executive session itself, so we're just talking about the votes going in, and then the secondary vote and the actions thereof. So does anybody have any sort of questions, discussions, questions for Joe, discussions on it? Ashley?
Could you explain a little bit as to what a censorship of any member of the board means?
To be honest with you, Ashley, after many years on the board, this would be my first go-around on this. I do believe it is basically a slap on the hand, saying you did something wrong. Please don't do it again. But I'll ask the...
Yes, there's no, like, it doesn't kick somebody off the board or anything like that, but it is a public sort of...
Yeah, Joe, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it also is, it's like the opposite of a motion to commend as well. Like, we could make a motion to commend, doesn't really have any, other than kind of an attaboy, pat on the back. A motion to censure is nothing more than a slap on the wrist. There's no real penalty. I would still be the chair.
It's just a documented action, that's all. Anybody else have any thoughts they'd like to bring up this time? Jim?
I don't know if you can clarify, or Carrie maybe, like why we consult with legal and executive session. Because for me, when this situation was taking place, I felt like in between those two votes, there was like Joe said, we had voted at the previous meeting to consult with legal, and I think there was an assumption that we would consult with legal in public, and I just want some clarification as to why that happens.
At this point, I agree that at some point, we do need to clarify maybe a when or how we can consult legal. This particular issue in front of us is solely about the action on the vote, not actually the consultation of the legal, we're talking about our chair's actions and not the consultation part aspect of it.
I respect that.
But I do agree that there is some confusion there.
Yeah.
Anything else? I will just say, oh, I'm sorry, please go.
So, I was upset about the second, the reconsidered vote. but I was not prepared to make a call to censure the board chair over these actions. I felt it would be sufficient to have the minutes reflect that there was a deviation from standard protocol. It is difficult to have every bit of that protocol at hand. And so while I would rather have not gone into executive session, again, I was not prepared to make a motion to this effect this evening.
You can go.
No.
I mean, I'll just say again, what I said previously, I feel like we all were misinformed. We all got up and assumed that the 5-4 vote meant that we would go into executive session. I don't think it was anything that Joe intentionally was trying to coerce anyone to go into executive session, so I don't agree with this motion because I feel like we all learned something that night that any one of us at any time, if we had known better, could have spoken up and said, hold on, we need to have 3/5 and 5-4 doesn't make 3/5. So I don't think that we need to censor our chairperson for this action because I think it was all of our mistakes. We all just usually go with the majority and we just follow suit and say the majority is what the vote is and therefore we go into executive session. So I don't think that it was anything that Joe meant as ill intentions or in any manner.
I'm going to actually piggyback on what Bree said a little bit in that, to me, censorship should go towards something that was done knowingly, willfully, and you're actually trying to go around the rules or do something like that. Or,
Yeah.
in this particular case, I feel that this was not done at all in that regard. It was a mistake. Like I said, I've been on the board a fair amount of years, and I honestly cannot remember of one executive session we went into that wasn't unanimous. Might have been one, but I don't remember it. So this was kind of was new. So, and I happened to be just walking by Joe and Carrie because neither knew that they had done anything when the lawyer actually said, excuse me, hold on. And that's when things changed. Now, if they came back into the meeting and tried to move on, that would have been a different story, but that's not what happened. They tried to remedy it. So with that being said, I don't see there's any reason to censor at this point. So, but does anybody have anything else? All right, so the current motion on the floor is a censorship of our current chair. Does anybody want to need it read out completely again? All right, so all those in favor of the censorship of, all opposed?
One abstention, right?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, yes, sorry,
Yes.
I was going to say
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I'm looking around like,
Okay.
That guy.
So I bequeath it back to you, boss.
Great, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the report of the board chair, and I typically use my board chair reports to talk about things to you, other board members. I think tonight, I feel important. I think it's important to kind of maybe speak to the audience or to our teachers or anyone else in the future here when we're talking about some of the wording around our IJJ policies, particularly about obscenity. And I think we've all talked about this word a number of times. We've talked about a lot of these words. People watching these meetings may or may not understand why we're spending so much time on these words. But I want to highlight something called the Miller test. And I'm just going to read this, essentially a couple paragraphs here from the Michigan Library Association. They had a nice write-up on their website. And it is titled, An Explanation of the Miller Test for Obscenity. And the Miller test is a national standard for determining whether material is legally obscene, hence why we were using obscene in our policies. Yeah, this is a test for the United States. The test is named after the 1973 case in which it was developed, Miller versus California. Prior to that Miller case, this is a Supreme Court case, prior to that Miller case, obscenity standards were vaguer, which is a good word, and more inconsistent. The Miller test is known as the three-prong obscenity test. because the test has 3 criteria. The first one is, does the work, so this material, or this thing that we are bringing to the library or our classrooms, does the work, as judged by the average person applying contemporary community standards taken as a whole, appeal to the prurient interest. Now, prurient's a fun word. I shouldn't say fun, as in like really fun. It's not really fun. But it's a word that many people may or may not completely understand. I did have the Webster's Dictionary definition to read, which I seem to have misplaced. But it is essentially referring to an interest of inappropriate sexuality, or a sexual interest that is specifically for the purposes of arousal, is generally what prurient means. So taken as a whole, does this appeal to the prurient interest? That's test number 1. Test number 2, does the work depict or describe in an explicit, patently offensive way sexual conduct or excretory functions as defined by state laws? That's test number 2. And test number 3, does the work taken as a whole lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? Test number 3. A work is deemed obscene under this test only if it meets all 3 criteria. In general, the first 2 criteria are intended to reflect community standards, while the final one considers the perspective of a reasonable person in the country as a whole. A work may be considered obscene in one community and acceptable in another, but if it has merit outside of the objectionable content, it will not be illegal under the Miller test. So again, words that we're using in our policies, one of the reasons why we're debating them so much and crafting the right words is to try to provide clarity. And just as I just explained, the term obscene and the Miller test is a clear national standard and should be maybe not easily applicable, but uniformly applicable by our teachers and by any kind of committee that gets into a reconsideration process, as well as the librarians. So I just wanted to point that out in case folks were wondering why obscene or why we were talking about specific words. So with that, unless folks have questions on that, we will move on to public comment. So public comment, I want to highlight that our board meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying out the official business of our schools. It's important to note that the meetings of the board are open to the public, however, they are not public forums. At each full meeting of the board, time is allocated to provide opportunities for citizens and employees to express opinions and concerns related to the matters under consideration by the board. These comments shall be within the guidelines set forth in policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings. Copies of the policy are available here and on the district's website. I'd like to highlight the following. The chair is responsible for recognizing all speakers. We ask that speakers identify themselves by sharing their name and town of residence. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes to express their views. Speakers should direct all comments to the board, specifically the board chair. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. It is not intended to be a conversation or a debate of issues. We know that school-related issues can be emotional, but we ask that civility is maintained. We will not permit profanity, gossip, defamatory comments, shouting at one another, or comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups. The board is faced with many important issues, so for the sake of efficiency, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments. Additionally, the board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. We certainly care about these concerns, but they are personnel matters which the board is not permitted to hear in public. If there are complaints against staff, these will be handled appropriately through our complaint policy KE. To reiterate, this is just a highlight of key points. Please refer to policy BEDH for a complete description. With that, is there anyone that would like to speak? Yes.
Christian Nicholas of Green. The school has set up a filter. Its use is intended to protect children from damaging content. The federal government, with the blessing of the Supreme Court, places an enormous net over the most powerful research tool ever invented by human civilization. We hereby openly acknowledge that access to sexually explicit material must be somehow damaging, with severe chronic negative outcomes. Just a quick search on PubMed gives you exposure to sexually explicit media in early adolescence is related to risky sexual behavior in early adulthood. Isn't this what every parent wants for his or her kid? And who can understand how these clever PubMed researchers were even able to define sexually explicit content? As a society as a whole, exerting nationwide community standards, we have said that we will not allow children to be exploited by this type of content. What difference does it make to your child if the description of a bareback party comes to them through their computer monitor or the pages of a book? Faculty say that we cannot proscribe in our educational materials content filtered by SIPA, because without this content, that they cannot use in any way on their computers, they cannot teach. Directors have said that there are young teens having sex, so to be safe, we must have sexually explicit content in the library. But only in the library books, not on the computers, for that would be unavoidably unsafe. But there is no hard evidence that this content keeps children safe. Indeed, showcasing such abuse as graphically and in as much intimate detail as possible only exposes more kids to these horrors and normalizes these atrocities. It is ironic that we are here discussing a policy which emphasizes the importance of exposing children to a variety of viewpoints, yet a sound, well-researched, and professionally presented pro bono legal opinion by an expert in First Amendment law goes unconsidered. What is more, we have a leader who bullies board members who truly represent their constituents. All decisions of the board are final, except when certain members of the board engage in wrongthink and don't feel that we need to spend the district's dollars on lawyers that have repeatedly fostered decisions that erode parental rights. It is obvious not only that sexually explicit X-rated content has the potential to harm children, but also that limiting its scope and detail does honor parental rights and preserves long-standing community values. Board members and administrators who pretend otherwise and congratulate themselves on their hard work and bravery gaslight us.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
I'm Bob Manchester from Turner. We've seen some disturbing behavior recently by members of this school board. Last week, the board chair did not honor the outcome of a vote that did not go his way. He seemed to coerce the board into a redo of an agenda item in a way that did not follow policy. We also heard a school board member insinuate that in her professional role as a teacher, she has entered into conversations with students on the topic of sexually explicit behavior. Those conversations would also violate policy. The community has spoken with a very clear voice. 500 people requested that you set sexually explicit material outside your selection criteria. When you appeared ready to do so, the board chair appeared to violate policy by manipulating the board into an executive session. After that session, the board abandoned language that honored the wishes of the community and instead adopted wording that the board chair liked. What good is policy if it is not followed? How will we, the taxpayer, have confidence the board is being ethical when the board violates policy in this way? The community expects this board to oversee our schools in ways that respect community values. We expect you to adopt standards in IJJ that set sexually explicit content outside the district's priorities. Do that tonight. Stop congratulating yourselves on the great job you are doing honoring the will of the community. Stop pretending you don't know the meaning of words and just do what we asked. After you have done that, this community expects this board to respond to last week's actions and comments by directors that undermine district policy. You must do these things to begin to restore the public trust.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment? Yes.
I'm Judy Manchester, and I live in Turner. It's been fascinating watching the school board meetings for these past few weeks, especially with regard to how you have discussed proposed amendments to the policy IJJ that would set as sexually explicit content outside the selection criteria. The superintendent and several directors repeatedly claimed not to know what sexually explicit means, and that to use that term in policy would be impossible due to its vagueness. Debate over sexually explicit raged for hours over several meetings, and it still didn't seem to be resolved. This boggles my mind. For months, this board has had in its possession a letter from Sam Whiting of the Whiting Law Firm in which he gives preliminary opinions on the legal merits of amendments that would have restricted obscene, sexually explicit, and pervasively vulgar content. This letter is a public document and was obtained through an FOAA. On the topic of the need for a definition of the term sexually explicit, he quotes the Supreme Court. I'll quote from this letter. As the Supreme Court has stated, mathematical certainty is not required. A policy may be marked by flexibility and reasonable breadth rather than meticulous specificity. So help me out here. What part of this don't you understand? Those watching this embarrassing spectacle have to conclude that you are either ignorant of what the Supreme Court said in the letter, which you have read, or you are gaslighting us. And you know good and well that the term sexually explicit is already used in other district policies and has been for years and years. Sounds kind of like gaslighting to me. So shame on you. Shame on you. How are we to have any faith in our democratic government if elected officials act like you? It's high time you have grown-up adults pretending that you don't know what sexually explicit means. Stop pretending that the courts won't accept it and put it into policy so that it agrees with other policies. Start behaving like you are actually competent for the job for which you have been elected.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Seems a little bit like playing monkey in the middle here. Betsy Bullard, I'm a resident of Turner and a parent of, I almost said a parent of 2 students in the district. That's actually not true any longer. I'm the parent of a recently graduated senior and an incoming 9th grader. So as a Turner resident, a taxpayer, and a parent of students, I'd like to offer my perspective. We are very fortunate to have some gifted and dedicated staff working diligently to provide an engaging learning environment in our district, and for that we're very fortunate, and I feel fortunate my children were able to experience that. Of course, our district is not perfect. Nothing is perfect, and certainly not this district. It is my sincere hope that this board finds time in its schedule to engage in the challenging work around ensuring that our schools provide a rigorous and engaging learning environment, be it supporting effective professional development for our staff, predictable behavioral standards and expectations, and rigorous and relevant coursework. In summary, my concerns as a parent of children in the district and as a taxpayer are around ensuring we have supported, skilled staff, learning conducive behavior in our schools, and engaging coursework. I have not one moment of concern about materials in our libraries. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Jimmy Childs leads. Parental rights be damned, huh? I mean, you'd think that we're a bunch of adults sitting here trying to convince other adults that you can't have sexually explicit material in your possession. We're not doing that. These are our children, our most prized possessions, the things that we love and fight and will die for the most. Sexually explicit, obscene, obscenity is just a word so you can try to go around what's in the books through law. If you went to all these, if if you went and knocked on doors such as I have, these people don't want this stuff in this school. You know, the 3-prong test, what's that gonna do? You know, I mean, what excuses are we gonna come up with when people get hurt? We just didn't know? Weren't our intention? Board members have been fighting against parents. Staff in this school have been fighting against parents, like myself, who are just trying to protect our kid from obscene material. At what age, if our kids were friends, at what age, your kid comes over to my house and there's explicit stuff, blowjobs and whatnot on the coffee table, at what age do you want me to put them away so your kid can't find them and can't pick them up? At what age? It's our right as parents to protect these kids. And that's what we're doing. Like, do you think we're ever gonna feel bad that we're sitting here trying to convince you adults that we don't want sexually explicit material, which is all through these books, all through them. This is a nationwide thing, all through them. You know, your voting record, your words are what's gonna be used against you in the future. How you vote. We are just trying to ask you to keep sexually explicit material out of the hands of minor children. That's all we're asking for. Like, I'm a bad person. I will never be a bad person. Never. I'll never feel bad protecting my kid. As the old board chair protected her kid from seeing obscene stuff last year. You know? Never. So at what age can I give your child a piece of pornography, a piece of sex? At what age can I do it? Peter, anybody. At what age do you want me to do it? It's not my responsibility. Parental rights be damned. Be damned. You know? When I said there was 100 and something signatures from Leeds and somebody said 1,800 residents, well, I knocked on 120 something doors and only 12 people didn't want to sign for whatever reason. 12 out of 120 something. That's over 90% ratio. Do the math, you knock on 1,800 doors. You know? It's not on your side here. Sexually explicit material ain't, I can't give it to your kid, you can't give it to mine. You guys are duty of care, standard of care for our kids. People that don't care about this book, I want to do something else, too bad. We care about this stuff. These are our kids. These are our kids. Okay? So you guys are going to be held accountable for what you allowed this to happen because you're just denying us parents this
Your
stuff.
3 minutes of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone else? Yes.
Yes. I'm Marlene Aguilar, teacher at Levitt, and I would like to thank the board for addressing every real concern
Real kids, sir.
instead
please
of
don't
all the
interrupt.
vague accusations. When real specific materials could be mentioned that are concerning, I think they would be addressed. But when people keep saying sexually explicit, we can't find what you're talking about if you don't tell us what they are. So I just want to thank the board that every time there has been a concern, a real concern, it has been addressed.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
Sydney Bullard, a resident of Turner and a recent graduate of Levitt. I think you deserve to hear from a student that's been in the schools for 14 years. I think I started when I was 4. Not once have I ever had any material in school that was remotely inappropriate, remotely sexually explicit. 14 years. Clearly it's everywhere, but never seen any of it being in the school for 14 years. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Going once? Twice? Oh, yes.
So Jessica Nichols, resident of Turner, parent of 3 children, one who is also now graduated, 2 that are in the high school. So this is a question for the chair. It was not planned, but I do think that maybe you need to look at your audience and how people are presenting themselves in the audience. And there is some concern about censuring the board for bullying behavior, and there's bullying behavior happening here. So I just think that you should be aware of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to move on to communications. I do not have any communications.
I just have one transfer. Anna Langland, who is currently the office support assistant in the high school, is transitioning to the athletic office support assistant. That's the new position that we approved in the budget. So now the high school will be looking for a new office support assistant.
Okay. See no questions, we'll move on. To adjustments to the agenda, there's only one more, well, I guess two things I'd like to say about the agenda. We have a consent agenda with only one item on it. I don't think it's worth going through that for one item. We're just going to make that one item a new old business item, and we'll move that to the end of new business. And I would also like to move all of the IJJ-related items. There's 3 of them. There's the second reading of each of the new IJJ policies, as well as the potential deletion of the current IJJ policy, should we approve new ones. I'd like to move those to the end and get the new business dealt with first. So I don't know if there's any objections to that.
Basically, they're just doing 2 things and then going to that.
Pretty much. We're going to take care of this new business. And first off, we'll do item 9.2. Okay. Item 9.2 is the consideration and approval of the resolution entitled "Resolution to Authorize a $4,878,966 Energy Conservation Project for School Facilities and Related Lease Financing," in the form presented to this meeting, and that an attested copy of said resolution to be included with the minutes of this meeting. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Peter, is that a second? Kyle?
Over.
And discussion. And I think maybe Gabby or Carrie, you want to highlight.
So as we've been giving all of the documents with EEI and the contracts and everything to legal counsel to make sure that the contracts are accurate, this is something, because of the loan that we have to do, the board has to take action. So we learned that too late last week. Last week, we just sort of got your approval to move forward with the lighting projects for the summer and the 2 heating and cooling projects for Leeds and Green, but this is another piece of it.
This is the same project we talked about.
Yeah, it's
moving
not a new
forward
one,
with
correct.
option B at the last meeting.
Correct.
But this language is critical for
Yeah.
moving forward with the loan.
The financial part.
Financing.
Yeah.
Did anyone have any more questions or discussion points on this? I can definitely give you a couple more minutes if you want to read it again. I see people trying hard to read it over again. Yes, Peter.
Does everybody remember what the exact project we're talking about?
This is the air conditioning.
This is the
and
air conditioning in Green and Leeds, as well as the furnace system in Green, and the upgraded LEDs district-wide.
So can I just clarify one thing, just for the sake of public? It's dehumidification in Green.
Yeah, I know, I was letting it go with the AC. I was letting it go.
But no, I think that, because AC would be like way
Okay.
more money than what we're spending.
So yes, it
Okay.
is upgrading the air handling systems, and in
Yes.
the process adding dehumidification, which will, on a side note, cool the places.
One wing in Leeds will get air
Yes,
conditioning.
the worst wing.
The worst
So if we
wing,
want to be
yes.
clarified, we're really pushing those 2 words right here, I want you to know on this one, that's,
Energy conservation.
yeah, we're really pushing those 2 words.
A little lighting,
Yeah.
certainly. And the oil and propane.
Yeah, the oil,
Yeah.
yeah, that one, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, yes.
Yeah, why is it considered lease financing?
I don't have an answer for that.
I think that's just wording.
Yeah, I think that all the purchases that we make as a district are considered leases, and then we opt to purchase everything at the end of the lease for $1. That's how our leases are typically worded.
We own it when we're done. If that's
We
what
do
your
own it.
question- Yeah, we own it.
We
We
do
own
own
it when
it
you're done, if that's
at
what
the
you
end
want
of
to
this.
do.
We do.
Okay, so I didn't see a buyout option or anything.
Yes.
Oh, no, we
Unless it's
100%
just-
own that, everything, when it's done.
Yep.
I don't know why it's called leases, though. I've been asked that a number of times.
So we'll see if we can figure that out.
Yep.
Send it out in an email.
All right. Any further questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? I believe that is unanimous. So moving on to the one item that was in our consent agenda, that is an instructional nomination. And again, this is to be acted upon after the nomination has been read by the superintendent. It is, I'll let you go ahead and read through it here.
Yep, so this is Karen Netto to be a teacher at Green. Karen has been a teacher this year. She was on a one-year contract, and a position opened up through a transfer that I think I reported last week of a teacher from Green to Turner Elementary. So Karen was already on board. They did do interviews, but she did an excellent job this year in 6th grade. We'll be staying in 6th grade, and staff are very excited to have her stay on board as a teacher.
Great. Probably should have called a motion for that before we started discussion, but there's a motion from Bree, a second by Peter. All right, all those in favor of this instructional nomination, the Green Elementary School teacher assigned to grade 6, is unanimous. Okay, I believe that is all business not related to IJJ, so we will then move into item 8.1, old business. It's our second reading and adoption of Curriculum and Policy Committee recommendation of policy IJJC, selection of instructional materials in IJJCE, citizens' request for reconsideration of instructional material form. Is there a motion for that? Kyle, is there a second? We'll give it to Crystal. So to start discussion, I would actually like to immediately make an amendment to it. And let me read that here. I had it written down. Scattered myself. Thank you very much. So IJJC, the motion to amend policy IJJC to maintain the language in paragraph L, not be obscene, semicolon, and, in the criteria for selection, and delete the alternative paragraph L, which is to take into consideration the level of obscenity, sexually explicit, pervasively vulgar content, semicolon, and, as well as to strike the word shall from paragraph M, which currently states shall be affordable of the criteria for selection. Is there a second for that amendment? Jamie. The reason, one of the things I really want to make sure is that we have this clean. So I wrote that down, so I handed it to Gabby. So we had a real clean amendment here. Obviously, we approved amendment for 2 different paragraph Ls in our first reading. And so this amendment on the floor makes a decision on that, right? One of those paragraph Ls here. It is the one that says not be obscene. The other paragraph L is to be struck.
Can,
Yes?
sorry.
Go ahead.
You added shall to that, and I think that's where we get confused.
Where-
I know, but that almost should have been just get that out of the way.
Which one's that, M?
Well, you threw M in your
So
thing.
that was actually, if you recall, part of Anthony's original amendment. was-
No, I understand, but it's just like it's,
I'm putting all the
yeah, I'm
corrections
putting,
into one.
yeah, okay.
So the first piece of that was the L statement, making a choice. The second part of that amendment I just read was the striking of the word shall in front of M. Because currently, the way we amended it, the way it was amended, and I'm going to read it exactly here. If someone has it handy,
I do.
if you want
It
to
says
read it.
instructional materials selected should, and then if we kept the shall, it would say shall be affordable.
And I'm not so sure the intent was for that, maybe it was, but it doesn't seem, but this amendment, the intent is to strike the shall, so all the list remains should, but striking the or, so it's an and. Or did I say that backwards? No, it should all, the list remains a should list, striking the word shall, and the or statement is removed, so it's and.
Okay, so it's opposite of what I'm seeing here. So you want to cross that off and replace it with should?
Nope, it should
So we're
here.
over the top.
Should.
Oh,
it should
so you
say
just wanna
should.
cross
I'm
that
just
off.
crossing off the shall, yes.
S word.
Yeah, a lot of words. Anyway, so further discussion on that amendment. Sorry, go ahead, Bree.
No, did Anthony have a second
I
first?
thought he did, but
Go ahead,
he
Ann.
pointed at you.
If I could ask a point of information, do we have a written legal opinion from our legal counsel on the wording for IJJ?
We do not have a written legal opinion.
Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts, discussion points around this amendment? Reed?
I guess to help clarify for me too, I would like to, I feel like, and this can continue in conversation later on, but I feel like C and L, right? Our conversations were fairly similar, and I'd like to see the language to kind of reflect that they are equal, right?
Wait till you
And
hear my
so-
amendment for L.
Right. So when I look here, even still, that's just my point. Is like I just want to make sure that maybe we like also do a cross comparison on both sides to make sure that.
Yep.
Because if we're going to say not be obscene and the other one says is free of obscenity,
I can promise.
I'd like to tighten up the language.
I can promise
Okay.
I have an amendment ready for L.
Okay.
It makes it not be obscene as opposed to show.
Yeah,
whatever
it
says
just,
now.
if we're going
Yeah.
to go the same way, it needs to make sure that we just,
Yeah, but that'll come in the next,
Perfect.
the next one.
Okay.
Yeah,
because otherwise it's going to be confusing.
So I agree, and I think it's very important that we have equivalent
Language
language in the policies, and I also assure you that I've got an amendment for L that is going to do just that when we get to L
Okay.
policy.
Another point of information, could you please restate the motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
The motion is to amend policy IJJC to maintain the language in paragraph L, quote, "not be obscene, semicolon, and," end quote, in the criteria for selection, and delete the other paragraph L, quote, "to take into consideration the level of obscenity, sexually explicit, and pervasively vulgar content, semicolon, and," end quote, as well as to strike the word, quote, "shall," unquote, from paragraph M, which currently shall be affordable, of the criteria for selection.
And can I just clarify one thing, that "or" that's between the two L's, that's like just, we had two. So that wasn't language that anybody wanted in there.
The "or" in between the L's was,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, Anthony?
So I understand that we have talked about this an awful lot, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse. But I want to thank you for, in your opening remarks, reminding us all about the three-pronged test. Because when you really think about the three-pronged test, you start to apply it to all manner of things that you might find in a library or in a museum, on television, in movies that you might see in the theaters. Virtually nothing meets that standard. Because of the third prong, fully stated, has artistic value, historic value, scientific value. It kind of goes out from there. The argument that something has artistic value or scientific value when you start thinking about anthropology and sociology and psychology, there can be really excellent arguments that things that are completely beyond the pale in polite society still do not quite meet that definition, because they are appropriate for certain situations, in particularly academic settings, for instance, where something that is truly obscene simply would not be. And so I just have to remind you all that we do have wording from the Supreme Court that states we don't have to argue about the term sexually explicit or the term pervasively vulgar. We don't. the Supreme Court does not expect this board to fully define, and every school board, and every municipality, and every museum, whatever. It doesn't expect us to do that. It says that you can use common understandings and apply your local standards. And I beg this board to bear that in mind and put something, anything, slightly stronger than simply proscribing obscenity. So I'll just leave that at that.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's anything I could add to that I haven't already said either, so I'm going to not continue. But I would certainly welcome anyone else to, before we vote. I think right now we're still discussing the amendment language itself that I put forward. We haven't voted on that yet, so it would be no. Go ahead.
So what's the procedure if I were to make another amendment, propose another amendment?
I think the cleanest thing would be to act on the amendment on the floor now rather than amending the amendment. I know we have done that in prior meetings, but it has led to tremendous confusion in the minutes and what have you. So if you would like, it's within your purview to amend the amendment I have on the floor, and we can act on that and discuss it. I would prefer that we act this amendment and move forward. But
Well,
that's up
just,
to you.
I'm not to speak officially, but I mean, your amendment struck the second L.
Yes.
As my amendment would strike the first L. If we were to act on yours and accept it, can I make the motion afterwards to strike it?
You could. Yes.
To reverse it? To reverse
Yeah,
what we
I
just
mean,
voted
it
on?
would be a reversal on something we just did, so I just don't know how the proper way to do it.
There's other things in there, but you could certainly put a motion on the floor to strike. We just-
Okay, I mean, if it's
portion
cleaner
of what we
to,
just approved.
if it's cleaner to act on yours first, then I'm fine.
Yes, Peter.
I have to, my greatest concern regarding this one and the next one has been by far the parental right aspect of it. Second, following that, the ability for information to be presented and have an equal share or an equal voice in whatever fashion, whether it be the curriculum or whether it be the library material available to our students. Thirdly, with the selection itself. But that does take concern. I do feel that the parental, I'm kind of looking at the overall big picture here because hopefully this is the end of this, but I do feel as being very, very concerned by parental rights and the degrading of that in our school district, or all districts, not just ours, just in general. Legislature primarily, but anyways. That it has been enforced or significantly with this proposal. The ability for more concise and more precise evaluation of the books by the general public, as well as some other aspects, really has helped that. The ability for us to take our kids away from books or not permit them is really going to help that. So when it comes to parental rights, I feel that that's, if we don't want them to see it, you know, we don't have any say on the other kids in the district. We only have say on our kids when it comes down to the very final parental right aspect. So if I don't want my kid to see it, we can say that. So, and when it comes, I've been assured that fairness and open-mindedness will be used for all curriculum and book purchases, and that we'll make sure that we are working towards a even selection, regardless of our political, ideological, or any sort of beliefs. So I'm taking that, and we'll see. Lastly is what is there. I myself was not going to agree with moving forward with nothing. I felt we needed some stronger language than we currently had. We needed some sort of guidance when it came to issues. And I probably spoke poorly at the last meeting, because clearly some stuff that many people felt was wrong or not appropriate for kids of all ages in a high school, because that's where we're primarily talking realistically, was there and we needed to address. You know, that can be said, but the fact that a book did get taken out and the fact that some books didn't make it in the second time around. So I felt obscenity was at least a good start and probably covered 99% of the things. And then this falls to me for not looking into it more, because I all of a sudden became concerned. The same time that Anthony just spoke with the three-pronged aspect. In my mind, I did not realize it, and this is my fault, that it had to meet all three. And is that a requirement, or is that something we wish to choose? Because if it has to meet all three, I do have concern that at that point, we do take all the teeth out of the word obscenity. Because there is a part of the country, regardless how you look at it, who consider anything and everything appropriate for one of the terms that fall into that third section. And that's where all of a sudden my concern comes back a little bit. So I guess I'm not sure how to accept that part. You know, when all of a sudden, the first two phrases were like, okay, that makes sense. But that third one is kind of like, well, this is just in case you want to put it in there, here's your cover. And that makes me nervous. So I'm just curious, and I guess I'm going to look towards our administration on how do I accept that? How do I feel safe that that isn't going to be a blanket cover to say, okay, this book might be showing some really graphic stuff, but somebody in New York thought it was art, so we're going to sell it.
So if you have
And
something
I
to
don't mean to
say,
address
I have
you
something to
particularly,
follow up
but,
on
you
if
know.
want.
The only thing that I would say is that, in my mind, the teeth of the policy is in the process of having multiple people participate in what actually gets put on shelves and what actually is selected for use in classrooms. Because I think that is where you get multiple perspectives on things and multiple eyes on determining whether or not something is going to serve our students well, or is going to be a distraction, or is going to be inappropriate for the students that we're trying to serve. So for me, that's the teeth of it, is the process. It is added significant amount of work to administrators, which is fine. I'm not saying that to say like poor administrators. I'm saying like that actually is a lot of work and they're actually doing it.
But I would like a quick follow-up just to finish it off real quick. That part, I believe, but if we're using the word obscenity in our language as administrators' tool or enforcement to make those decisions, with that third step, how does that not allow a person to say, but we're sorry, this book is considered, we're talking about books a lot, or this curriculum is considered appropriate and, you know, very poignant. So it has to be in your school district, and if it's not, we're suing you. So where I'm looking, you know, because we're often talking about books being taken out. The next step is people saying, no, those books have to be there. And how does obscenity, with that third step, give you the ability to tell those people, in our district, we choose no?
I'll just add that there's an initial step that Carrie was describing, which is the administrative selection process, which, again, if you think about what we had in our process, was a single person ordering books. We now have multiple reviews and multiple viewpoints on that. We still have a reconsideration process, which ultimately assembles a group of people, whether it's the group of people in the curriculum policy, which is a certain makeup as described, or a group of people in the library material policy, which is a different makeup. The library policy brings in more community members, as opposed to curriculum policy does bring in out-of-district folks and what have you, but those are then groups. So the question of that third prong of the test gets decided by that group of, that panel, okay, in that reconsideration process. Now, that panel may make a decision that if we were sued for that decision, and it went to court, some other jury or judge may interpret it differently. But from our perspective as a school board, that test is a test we use. It's as clear as we could make it for the administrators and teachers when they're selecting materials. But there's going to be a judgment by this panel during reconsideration. And if that whole panel agrees there's artistic to literary value, then that's the decision. But it's not going to be just one person sitting back and using that prong as an argument for that material to be there. It's not one person's judgment to kind of sweep it in. There will be many people along the judgment line to try that will have to also be convinced that that is a valid judgment. So that's how, again, the word obscenity wasn't even included in the original administration
my
policy.
recommendation.
Right. It wasn't even included in the original policy. This has, again, as a reminder, this was an attempt at compromise because there was so much push to try to insert language or words to describe these materials. And so that's how obscene was placed as a criteria.
The Miller test, the 3 stages, can you read that again?
I can.
Do you mind?
I can. Number 1 is, does the work as judged by the average person applying contemporary community standards taken as a whole appeal to the prurient interest? Again, prurient is, here they say inappropriately sexual. I've seen other definitions in Webster that prurient is referring to like purposefully arousal, sexual content, things that are not, things that are inappropriately sexual. That's test number 1. Test number 2. Does the work depict or describe in an explicit, patently offensive way sexual conduct or excretory functions as defined by state laws? Number 3, does the work, taken as a whole, lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? So does it lack value scientifically, artistically, literary? Is there no value to it? Is it for the purpose of sexual arousal? Is it patently offensive? Those are the 3 tests. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, does it even make sense to even incorporate the Miller test with using the word obscene?
Well,
if we just use the definition of obscenity and not, because we're not talking about it per se, but there is, law that or case that has been decided using the Miller, and they use the Miller test, but is it really something that we have to do in the process of evaluating the books? Then they get rid of that whole 3-prong idea that, Peter's saying.
I imagine that a reconsideration process could completely ignore that. I imagine that could be true. There's nothing in our policy that says you must follow the 3-prong test when considering obscenity. But the reason to purposefully use that term, which has been prescribed essentially through our consultation with legal counsel, is because if it gets challenged, if we get sued, and this could be any way, for removing a book or not removing a book, the language is going to matter in those lawsuits, and the term obscenity is defined this way legally. So we can choose to ignore this, but it would be effectively at our own peril, no matter who sued us, whether it was someone that wanted the book removed or someone that didn't want the book removed. The term obscenity, the reason why we're using that word is because it is a well-defined term with a clear and straightforward test. And it's not just for us as a board, but it's also for our teachers and librarians and staff that are working and making selections. They know exactly what to expect.
So then it brings me to I'm thinking out loud, but if we're using a defined word that's boxes, feels like it boxes us in, why use that word and not replace it with a different word or definition instead of using the word obscene? Because I feel like if we're using the word obscene, we have the 3-prong test that we have concerns with, that it might not be able to be, it kind of, because in the last meeting, maybe
not even having it in there and having that open, but we do want something, you know, a line there that I almost feel like that, I'm just thinking out loud, but I just feel like is the word obscene really just really handcuffing us instead of having actually something a whole different that has no definition to it. So it kind of gives us the ability to be fluid.
I feel like you're asking me, so I'm going to answer, but then I'm going to move on because I think Ashley wants to speak. And the answer that I have is that, again, inserting not be obscene was an insertion from the administrator's recommended policy. It was actually a modification of a larger statement that was proposed by Anthony to include obscene as well as sexually explicit as well as vulgar. Okay, so that obscene isn't changed. The Miller test is the same. You know, really what we've done is kind of removed the more ambiguous words like vulgar, particularly sexually explicit has other connotations, which we've talked about ad nauseum here. I don't want to get into necessarily again, but to answer your question, we've really just removed those two other words that were already in the proposal by Anthony as a compromise. Like, we can live with obscene, you know, that works, that's well defined, that's the Miller test. That said, you know, I think there would be, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, there'd be support to remove obscene if that is what you're angling for. But I think if we're trying to use words to describe materials, it's very hard to use words that are ambiguous or may have unintended consequences, because it makes it hard for our administrators to enforce the policy and for our teachers and staff to enact it. So I think using words that are well defined is important because it provides clear direction. So, Ashley.
Could you repeat the first one of the Miller test? Sorry,
Yes. Does the work as judged by the average person applying contemporary community standards taken as a whole appeal to the prurient interest?
So isn't that a formal way of asking people to judge whether it's overly sexually explicit?
Right, basically, does the average person looking at this piece of work as a whole, okay, feel that it has been put together for the purposes of arousal, like sexual arousal specifically, not necessarily, it's not a piece that's up there to describe anatomy in the classroom, right? It is a piece of the prurient interest, which, again, I'm trying hard here to define prurient. I don't know if someone wants to actually look it up, but you'll find the arousal used. This thing I'm quoting calls it inappropriately sexual, but it is clearly a sexuality of judgment that is not just, you know, depicting an act of sex or something of a sexual organ, but specifically for arousal type of purposes.
Do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
It's Webster's.
Webster's.
Marked by or arousing an immoderate or unwholesome interest or desire, especially marked by arousing or appealing to sexual desire.
Jamie.
Back to Peter's initial concern, despite what people might think, I also do not want pornography in our schools. And I think we've been talking a lot about these A through M bullet points, but I just wanted to point out that, you know, in building this policy, the selection procedure is also really important, and I feel like that has some built-in steps as well that might address some of your concerns, Peter. So, you know, that second paragraph under selection procedure is really important, and on top of that, Carrie also added in as well as relevant research regarding the efficacy of particular materials. So, you know, in selecting, because we're talking about curriculum right now, right? So in selecting curriculum, the professional staff has to evaluate the existing materials, consult with staff from appropriate departments or grade levels, personally review the material, and obtain recommendations or reviews from appropriate reputable sources, and consult relevant research regarding the efficacy. So there's even more built into that afterwards. I think you'd probably find it hard to go through all of those additional steps with the curriculum and have something pornographic, because our teachers don't want pornographic materials to be teaching their teenagers. So I do think that selection procedure is an added part to A through M that I don't want to, ignore.
Anyone else? All right, then I think it's time to take a vote on the amendment that I put forward. Would anyone like me to read it again, or is everyone clear on the amendment?
Just read it one more time.
Read it one more time.
Thank you.
We are talking about the motion to amend policy IJJC to maintain the language in paragraph L, not be obscene, and, end quote, in the criteria for selection, and delete the other paragraph L, quote, to take into consideration the level of obscenity, sexually explicit and pervasively vulgar content, semicolon, and, end quote, as well as to strike the word shall from paragraph M, which currently reads shall be affordable, of the criteria for selection. That is the amendment on the floor. All those in favor of the amendment? It's 5. Need to write down.
I'm missing one.
Yeah, me too.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Peter, thank you.
All those opposed? I'm not sure what your vote is and opposed, Ashley. So 4 opposed. Okay, so we have amended with that amendment the second reading of policy IJJC. Is there further discussion around the policy?
But this, yeah, I would propose an amendment. I guess it'd be appropriate to strike, I would strike both L sections from the material here.
Hold on one quick. So currently it stands just with this.
Correct.
So
Okay,
right
so
now,
yes,
you just
so-
want to amend that you want to change L
Yep.
to
Nope.
whatever you want to say
Yeah,
here.
I'll say, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I would strike L as we just voted, where it reads not be obscene, semicolon, and replace that with take into consideration the nature of sexually explicit content in relation to curriculum.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that
Yep.
again?
Take into consideration the nature of sexually explicit content in relation to curriculum.
Okay.
Well, don't you mean the rest of the words too?
Nope. Nope.
Is there anything further you want to say about that?
No, I guess I'm opposed to using the word obscene because of the high bar that the Miller test creates, and I do fear that can be used as a shield of sorts, for such a high threshold. And this is just an attempt to get some consideration for the level of sexually explicit content. Obviously in curriculum, it's much less of the concern, I guess. But obviously, teachers in sexual education and other courses need to be able to present certain things. So I thought that adding in relation to curriculum was appropriate, that it's just something that is considered throughout the process.
Any more thoughts on that?
Do we need a
Do
second?
we have a second?
Oh, that's a great, yeah, is there a second by Kyle? I should have called for that before you said that, but seconded by Kyle. Any further discussion? Yes, Anthony.
So I really appreciate the addition of the language sexually explicit. I'm not sure that I think this amendment would go quite far enough, because I have several questions. I've asked these questions, but I have not gotten answers to these questions, and I think they cannot be ignored. And they can't be ignored because both IJJs will not influence our schools in isolation. They will communicate with other policies, right? So there will be these interactions between this policy over here and this policy over here. So for instance, if we allow sexually explicit content into our curriculum, if we allow it, and this is just a hypothetical, so work with me here. If we allow sexually explicit content in the curriculum, we have to then think, well, how is that curriculum going to get used? An awful lot of curriculum and program material, right? Program material is oftentimes, textbooks aren't textbooks anymore. They're these online resources, right? Students do work online. They submit papers online. Teachers create PowerPoints that are online. And we have a computer use policy that is really unforgiving. It states that any use, so that is a pretty universal kind of, it's binary, it's black and white. Any use that involves sexually explicit materials. It's actually sexually explicit, sexually suggestive, and so on. So it is a policy that has an extremely fine sieve, right? It does not even let in sexually suggestive content. If we let sexually explicit content into the curriculum, how is that going to be used? And if we push it out just a little bit further, you can ask yourself, well, how and Joe, this resonates through IJJL as well, right? So if I realize that it's not specific to IJJC, I will ask for your permission to broaden this conversation just a tiny bit. Because it seems very likely that what we adopt for language in IJJC is probably going to find its way into IJJL. If we have sexually explicit books, those books are cataloged in a computerized record. Those records are searched for online by students, by faculty, by parents. But it is especially important that students and faculty technically can't search for those materials because that would be any use, right? Any use. So we can buy these materials, we can spend district resources on these materials that we then won't be able to use unless we get rid of these other policies. And if you get rid of that policy on the computer and internet use, that has a big fiscal footprint because it is required if we want to get the preferred E-rate, whatever they call it, for our internet service. So I'm just saying, if this board adopts this language for these policies that allow sexually explicit content, it's gonna have to very quickly get rid of that wording in the other policies, in the student computer use policy and in the staff computer use policy, because they won't be able to utilize the books. There's no time for us to do that tonight. And I'm not sure no one has the authority to just say, yeah, just go ahead and ignore those policies. We would have to formally change those policies. And given that the Supreme Court of the United States has said, look, sexually explicit, you guys know what you're talking about. Don't worry about the super nitty-gritty here. So if we say that the work can't, that the curriculum and the library materials must be free of sexually explicit content, I think by now we know what we're talking about. We're not talking about, and because we've said it, people have said it, we're not talking about the kind of stuff that you routinely find on television, in R-rated films, in novels. We are talking about some novels and some films, right, that go a little bit beyond the pale. And those films tend to get NC-17 ratings. So that if someone were to challenge a book, request for reconsideration, a book by John Irving, the committee, the librarian would be able to say, yeah, it's really not that explicit. It really isn't. And then the review committee would be able to say, yeah, it's not that explicit. We're not bothered by it. And then if it makes it all the way to the board, we can say, that's not what we were talking about. That's absolutely not what we were talking about. I think there's an idea that somehow when something is requested to be reconsidered, it is some kind of calamity. But what it is really is that it's an opportunity for the community to come together and to reach a better understanding. Someone can raise their concerns. They might educate themselves in the process of doing that. So it's not like we have to create a policy that is like, it's going to shield us from any kind of reconsiderations. That's never going to happen. And we should also have confidence that our librarian, that the reconsideration committee, and that this board all have the opportunity to affirm the choices if they are sound choices, and say, yeah, no, it does not meet that bar. But we also have crafted a policy that right from the outset allows somebody to say, I think this is pretty sexually explicit, and for somebody to review it and say, whoa, I don't know how that got in. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Off it goes. That is a wonderful thing. That is a wonderful thing. But I just have to bring it back to the fact that IJJ is going to have this interaction with GCSA-R and IJMDB-R that absolutely cannot be ignored. It cannot be ignored because they can't coexist. We're going to spend money on things that cannot be used.
Before you go, Bree, I just want to say one thing, and that's that it has coexisted this way for a long time. Our current IJJ has nothing in it about sexually explicit. This is actually making a dramatic improvement, and the concern you have over that, it's something that we've been living with for a long time. And is it even a real concern? I think that, is that policy perfect? The other policy, the policy we're not even considering right now, is it perfect? It might not be, right? And maybe it is worth reconsidering that. Perhaps some type of curriculum use should be accepted. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think that your concern about another policy should be impacting us now, particularly with that policy, that the problem you're highlighting is already something that we've been living with for a very long time, and that has not been a problem. Go ahead. Go ahead. Well, is it on what we've been saying, or do you want to go?
Yeah, it was going to be up the policy.
Okay, go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Back to Alex and his amendment. I will just come out and say it. I don't think that the wording of this amendment has teeth enough. So I will not be voting in agreement of it because I think that we can battle back and forth about when it comes down to the other people who may or may not be in this room, who will be looking over material, how easy is it for them to say, yep, I took it into consideration? What would they do then? They took it into consideration. That's so flippant. Yep, I read it, took it into consideration. Going back to, as Anthony just said, you take a word like any. That has a definitive, like, beginning and end, like any, right? So does the word not. It should not be obscene. It literally, like, you can go back and forth and say, well, they could take one thing out of the Miller test. It should not be obscene means beginning all the way to the end. So if they feel that it was prurient, it depicts the explicitly offensive, and lacks the value, maybe it has a little bit of value, but it also has the 1 and the 2, it cannot. So I don't think that it will go back. I don't think people can be wishy-washy. It cannot be obscene. That means no, none, not. Just saying take into consideration the nature of sexually explicit content in relation to curriculum doesn't have enough teeth for me. And I would go back to the first one. That one has more teeth.
So I'd like to just go back to the internet use policy. That policy defines acceptable use. And it defines it as educational purposes and research consistent with the school unit's educational mission, curriculum, and instructional goals. And specifically says that students have to comply with the specific instructions from teachers and other staff when using the technology. So that is what is acceptable use. So anything students are doing that is part of the curriculum, part of instruction, part of the educational mission, and is in connection with teacher instructions is acceptable use. And then there is a list of prohibited uses that are everything outside of that. And sexually explicit is in there. So that would be sexually explicit, sexually suggestive, in addition to vulgar, abusive, discriminatory, a long list that is outside of the educational mission, the curriculum, our instructional goals, and specific instructions from teachers. So I just wanted to clarify that. And that is also the same for employee. Sort of what is acceptable use is defined, and then what is unacceptable is not defined, is defined next.
Anyone else on, and this is discussion around Alex's proposed amendment. Right. So we'll go to a vote. So we should probably repeat the amendment just to be clear on what we are voting on.
Do you want to read it and I'll check what I've got?
I have to strike L where it reads not be obscene, comma, and add, take into consideration the nature of sexually explicit content in relation to curriculum.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? That is 2. All those opposed? Just keep your hands up real quick. I think we have just one abstention, which is Kyle.
Thank you.
Kyle's abstaining.
So the motion, that amendment fails. We are back to the original or baseline discussion of the second reading of IJJC as amended by the first amendment we passed. More discussion, Ashley.
Yeah, I have an amendment, or I guess, I think maybe to make it easier, make it a discussion, and then if there's kind of support for it, I'll propose it as an official amendment. Does that make it a little cleaner?
Yeah, we can continue discussion and amend and propose the amendment later, but yeah.
Under selection of instructional materials, the last sentence, the superintendent is expected to keep the board informed about educational materials purchased for the school unit. Just in reading that, I feel like I'd like to have a little bit more formality behind that in terms, especially since I heard feedback that the policy and curriculum committee hasn't really done much curriculum work, that they've been so tied up in policy. And that maybe it would be helpful if we had a more formal process for receiving, the board to receive what materials were being purchased. So we added in there material along the lines of at least quarterly, the superintendent will report to the board a list of and any reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, and rejected. That gives the board the ability to, have a list, go through and review, and if there are things the committee wants to take up, then at that point they're able to see.
I want you to repeat it again, because I don't think I heard it 100%.
Yeah.
So this is under the donated materials.
Nope, under selection of instructional materials on page 1, under that last paragraph.
Yes. Yep, under the last paragraph, yeah.
So this would be at least quarterly, the superintendent will report to the board a list of and reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, and rejected.
One more time, a list of.
A list of and reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, and rejected. And then,
Why don't you make an emotion yet? Right?
Oh, okay.
You're just
yeah,
talking
so I
about
just
it,
wanted to
yeah.
get some discussion.
Yep.
If there's no support, then I'm not gonna bother.
Yeah,
And then on page 5, where it says, shall ask the superintendent to consult legal counsel.
We're in
Yeah, E, sorry. Well, midway through, in the review process, the committee should generally be neutral towards viewpoints expressed in materials and shall ask the superintendent to consult legal counsel for advice concerning any questions involving freedom of speech or expression. I feel like that kind of limits legal counsel's advice to free speech or expression. There may be other legal items they want to consult on. And I don't know if it's necessary that it's required to be consulted for every single consideration. So I'd like to have an amendment I put forward saying the superintendent may consult legal counsel for advice at their discretion. And that eliminates the need for what the parameters of why they're consulting, and then remove the requirement that they do it every time.
Okay.
Those are,
Those are two things.
Is that under E?
Yeah, that was under E, yeah. Putting you right on the spot, Carrie.
Where is it under?
Top of page 5. There's two bold.
Right after the
statements.
bolded line. at the
Oh,
top.
okay, I was looking at bolded lines, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's the one.
Yep, no, I
There
got
it
it
is,
now, I
there
got
it
it
is,
now.
okay.
I got it now.
So this is, we're talking about curriculum.
Correct.
So I just want to be clear. So the item, okay.
If you want, other people can put in their 2 cents while Carrie's
Well, we
thinking.
need a second.
No, she
There's a
didn't.
motion.
Just-
Not even a motion.
This is not even an amendment. Yeah, go ahead. Agree.
And I would like to speak first about, the superintendent is expected to keep the board informed about education materials purchased, and in general, that has come up, Ashley, we aren't aware of curriculum, we haven't talked about it, but I think that's actually inaccurate. That's exactly what Teresa does. She is our curriculum specialist for the district, and she reports out to us. And so maybe it's not the superintendent, but the superintendent is able to pass it on to the curriculum specialist to give those reports out to the school board. I think it's unfair that we have said Teresa hasn't done that, because she literally has put us through fun little games and activities for us to see what does the reading program look like for the elementary school students and various other things. We did that this year. I've only been a board member this one school year, and so to say that this isn't happening and that we should know more, like more up to date, more quarterly, it is happening. Teresa does it, and she doesn't even do it necessarily on a quarterly. She just does it when it comes up, when it's appropriate, and it's been frequent enough this year that I feel like I have a good grasp. And that's not to say necessarily on the curriculum and policy committee, right, that there's different things we talk about, but that we are being informed of what the curriculum is in this district. So I don't think that we need to add in any extra wording here.
Who was first?
I think Peter
Peter was.
Okay.
Yes and absolutely not at the same time.
Absolutely, it's such a strong word.
It is, and it is a very strong word, and I'll
It's an
stand by it.
absolute word. Are
It
you
is.
sure you want to say that?
I do it all the time, and I get in trouble all the time.
Exactly. You can't take it back.
That's all right. I dig my
You
own
risk
grave
it,
many a
risk it.
day.
You're gonna roll
many
the
a
dice.
day. Yes, we do get notified quite often. I'm not saying I'm complete support. I do believe that I would like a more consistent listing, either available to us or presented to us, which is always simpler, of all curriculum and so forth and so on. I think this is, especially under the curriculum headline, this is a daunting project. are daunting requests, especially under curriculum. But it's something that, and quarterly, I'm not so sure, because it's not like we buy stuff all the time. But the thing is, we see a few curriculum items, yes. We don't see the complete curriculum, or we don't have available to us, unless we ask for it, the complete curriculum, pre-K through senior year, which is what this would be requesting. We can honestly say that we do not know exactly what is being taught unless we research it in third grade social studies right now. What is the curriculum for that? We have not had a presentation at all about those areas. Go to the high school. We've had very few what is the curriculum being taught right now in the high school in most any of our subject matters? So I will absolutely say that there is a lot, and I'm going to dare say the majority of the curriculum that is taught in the school, we only hear about on occasion, if at all. Subcommittee might see it, and I'm sure, and I'm guarantee you that our curriculum is available if we wanted to search it out. There is no doubt about that. I guarantee you, it's there.
Yeah.
But what's being requested is a simpler, more user-friendly version for those of us who are not in-depth digging.
Okay, I want to go to you, Jamie, and I have something I want to say so bad too, but I know that Anthony is.
Jamie has spoken only one time.
That is true, that is
Just in
true.
defense-
But on this particular
in defense
subject,
of
Anthony's first.
having
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
a chance to talk.
we're going to go, Jamie, I
Yes.
promise. Go ahead.
It's just, it's just a formality thing. We probably do
I
need a
know,
motion.
I know.
We probably do need a motion
Just-
for us to discuss.
Okay.
I don't
We're-
think so. I think
we're
we
already
can discuss
discussing
it.
the-
There's,
yeah, I
we're
mean-
just discussing
You
it
only
as
just
a
put it
whole.
in a motion.
No, we're discussing the original.
Yeah.
I was debating
discussing
that
it as a
earlier, and
whole.
I'm not exactly sure since we're not actually, we're just talking.
We're
We're allowed to just talk.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I'm-
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I be
Jamie.
the bearer of good news?
Yeah, okay.
So we have a program called Atlas that is coming out, and it will be forward-facing, so parents included, and teachers and board members can go on, and now it's, well, will it be ready in the fall?
In the fall? No. The timeline we set, which is in the strategic plan,
Yes.
is to have some of those curriculums done so that the board can review them by the end of next year,
Yes.
by the end of 24-25.
So we are working on that, and it will be forward-facing so that exactly what Peter said can happen, but instead of requesting it and having to go and seek it out, it will be an online forum, and even parents can go on and look at the curriculum of each. So those, I guess what I'm trying to say is those concerns are currently being met, but it's just taking a while to build the interface of it, but Atlas will eventually, that is the purpose of it,
I
exactly.
was going a very similar direction to you, Jamie.
Okay.
Okay, and that was that, and one of the things you highlighted also was the Curriculum Policy Committee hasn't had a lot of time to spend on curriculum because it's been very rapid policy. So there's two things I wanted to highlight. One was what Jamie was saying. We are looking to get Atlas up and running. It's already on the way. It is a modern, account-based interface that has a portal. Maybe it's not Power School, but it's like kind of like that, where you would log in to this system, and there's a parent-facing side of it where the parents can review curriculum. There's also a teacher-based side of it where they're actually able to work with each other, maybe across Leads to Green, and really coordinate curriculum better than they ever have before. You were part of that presentation, so I imagine that you had something to say. I think I saw your hand up as well, so we'll come back to you in a second. But so there's Atlas, and so there's the reporting aspect of what the curriculum is. 100% there's a project in the works that we are hopeful to have up and running in the next year or so that will be very transparent across schools, for parents, for teachers, and organized across the board. The other part is in our strategic plan, we very much identified major curriculum goals. And I've been concerned, and I've talked to Carrie about this, about how much progress we're making in curriculum policy towards those goals. And I need a little bit of foreshadowing here. We're gonna have some workshops coming up over the summer there's, we're going to keep talking about this, but one of the things I may propose is to form a separate curriculum subcommittee that can be focused on that. That is not going to get bogged down with the policy demands that are currently consuming our curriculum and policy subcommittee. It's kind of like the transportation maintenance thing that we were wrestling with, where transportation was largely eating into that transportation, the maintenance director's role. We're kind of separating that and getting another committee to focus on curriculum. Maybe something we want to do. So I'm not so sure. I guess just that particular statement about quarterly reports, I'm wondering if we really need that, where we're already working in other ways to try to hopefully solve that.
Yeah, so I mean, I would change, I mean, if semi-annually works better, I think that's all great. I think, the goal of having something sent out would still be to track changes that are taking place in curriculum. Because although Atlas was adopted, that's probably not going to be the last curriculum change that the district ever does, or parts of that change. So if there was a report that at the end of each semester just highlighted this is what's been requested, purchased, we didn't purchase this, and then the full board, not just those on the curriculum committee, get to see that list and can weigh in if they choose to, then I think, from my perspective, that would be helpful in just updating everybody.
Can I ask, again, curriculum, I'm pushy, I get pushy, I apologize.
I'll defer to Peter if he wants to.
I'd take it, why not?
All right.
I just want a clarification of what you'd be looking for. Not that I'm disagreeing with you. Curriculum is a particularly hard one, because it's not like, for the most part, curriculum is purchased, and Carrie might argue with me on this one, but I think approximately about once a year. It's part of the budgetary process. We buy new curriculum books. I think, are you referring to what books we're purchasing for curriculum? Well, I guess, what are you looking for in that list?
Programs. So not specific books, I think that'd be too time intensive to track books in every classroom.
Okay.
But program
all those English
changes,
classrooms.
or
The list.
high-level conceptual changes. I know there's something the legislature is considering for history that's coming up this fall that could have an impact on our districts across the state. If that goes into play, that's going to have an impact on curriculum. At that point, what would that look like? And I would expect that to be on that report.
Because I can see a once a year, and I'm not, but I'm just trying to think of when this actually all takes place. Once a year of potentially an email or a
Once a year.
printout that says,
Yeah, it could be
this
once
is
a year.
the overall curriculum throughout the district or something like that. Because it's usually a once a year type thing is how these big changes take place.
Yeah,
Would be
if
my
that's
guess.
more feasible and that's more in line with what the district's doing, then I would be open to that, if that's what it does, yeah. But I'd like to see something that just says, this is what we're doing with curriculum. And I'm not on that committee, so I don't know.
Anthony?
First things first, on page 5 of 6, under G, the last sentence, that also is sort of formalizing the necessity of always consulting legal, and so I think that should also be changed to at its discretion, or right. Then getting to the idea of the reports, which I actually think is a great idea, and I think the part of its beauty is that it doesn't specify that the report has to be some kind of formal thing. If Teresa regularly, once every month or two, updates us on curriculum purchases, well, that fulfills the requirement of this. This just codifies that the board shall be notified no fewer times than 4 per year, which seems reasonable. At least, perhaps it would actually be more appropriate to be semi-annually or something like that. Depending, I don't know what the purchase structure tends to look like, but it certainly creates an opportunity for the board to really maintain cognizance of changes to the curriculum, because we're not talking about a report of the curriculum 4 times a year. It's these things were purchased. Why were they purchased? They're purchased because of this. Oh, okay, great. Or what did you do that for? Probably not going to happen the latter way, but it just seems like it codifies the necessity and expectation of some oversight.
I just want to go once, too. All right, so.
Yes, go ahead.
And that is that I think just like our plant, transportation, and buildings, just like the size of our, our finances, just like our policy structure, there's a lot there. And I think making it regular reporting directly to the board by a staff member to try to keep our hands around the entire curriculum will be pretty intensive. And that's why I feel that it would be better, we'd be better suited forming a subcommittee that was specifically focused on curriculum, that functions just like other subcommittees, would have a chair that would report to the board major things. We can ask questions as a board to that person, just like all our other subcommittees form and function. But I'm very hesitant to prescribe reports of that nature in this policy from administration straight to the board, because I think it will be, I have a feeling it'll end up being burdensome in the end, and I think it'd be better work suited for a subcommittee that could focus on something so big and get back. So,
Could I just ask a quick follow-up to that?
yeah.
Would you then be recommending that we take out the sentence that the superintendent is expected to keep the board informed about educational materials purchased for the school unit?
No, I think that's a matter of delegation, right? The superintendent would still be expected to keep the board informed, but it could be through the subcommittee. I don't think that's out of the question. Go ahead, Bree.
Agreed. My comment is that curriculum is expensive. We don't typically, and I would think that in this district, we don't go out and buy new curriculum every single year. So really saying that at different points throughout the year, whether it's semi-annually, quarterly, there will be like limited stuff to really update. Most times probably not, because you're not necessarily purchasing curriculum 2 months and then another 2 months something else. It's expensive, it takes time. You're forgetting all the other sentences before this sentence where they had to go through and follow a procedure to get there. So I don't see really a need to put a time limit on when they should be updating us, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, I would be fine with something more of like on an annual basis, because curriculums just don't come in and then in a few months we're purchasing some, and I get it for like different content, right? A history curriculum might be purchased in September, whereas maybe a math curriculum, they're looking at it and don't make a decision and that doesn't come around until December. But that doesn't really happen where like we're constantly changing instructional materials and curriculum, because it's expensive and there's a long process that goes through it, which I feel that Teresa has like updated us at times and said, we're looking at this, we're considering that, and you get that update. But I don't think that we need to put, it would just be more work that we would say, oh, we have to check in, how's curriculum updates going, what new curriculum have you purchased, when they're just gonna say nothing, because it's only been 2 months since the last time we updated you, if we're trying to do something like, quarterly. But, so I don't think we should put a long timeline, like very specific timeline, but if we need to have something, I'd be okay with annually.
I think we are arguing a moot point right now, because there already exists a policy that states this. So, policy IGA already states this. It says the superintendent or designee is expected to develop plans and timelines as necessary for the development, implementation, and evaluation of the curriculum. The superintendent is expected to make recommendations to the board consistent with board policy in regards to professional development, instructional materials, and the resources needed for curriculum implementation. The superintendent will report annually, or if otherwise requested, to the board on the status of the curriculum. We already have a policy that says exactly this.
Peter.
Again, I would go back to the one aspect on this. What I wouldn't want to make it overly burdensome with too much of the details, but I do not think it is improper for the board to annually have an easy access to the overall curriculum, because in that statement, there is no the whole curriculum has to be presented. Because I believe, if I want to get down to Ashley's question, is she would like to know the whole curriculum, pre-K through seniors, what is being taught, when it changes, exactly. But, where is that, apparently it's going to be easily accessible in a year or so. But right now, and we've never had that full presentation. We've had presentations on portions, often towards math and science, which is honestly what I think it should be a lot of the time. But a lot of the other stuff we often gets overlooked. And so I'm putting words in Ashley's mouth, and I apologize, but I think one of the concerns is that once a year or thereabouts, she's looking for, this is the curriculum of the school district, if you'd like to review it.
Jamie, do you have your hand up?
I was just wondering if that would be more appropriate to be addressed within IGA, right? Like specify exactly that sentence that Peter said within IGA, which is the curriculum review and development policy. I'm just coming at this from a policy standpoint to keep things clean. That's all.
No, I can see that, because this is selection of new material in a
Right.
sense.
So I just want to clarify a couple things. One, this is instructional materials curriculum. So we create a curriculum, and then we buy materials to implement the curriculum. So I do think they are different things. Teresa and I have made we've not hidden the fact that curriculum hasn't been, Teresa started the position, they started a process, COVID happened, shuttered everything down. We're now coming back to that and saying, all right, we've got to get our house in order, correct? That doesn't mean that work hasn't been happening all along, it just hasn't been documented in a place that is easily accessible. Each teacher's got stuff, but if you walked into one classroom or another, my understanding is that social studies in 4th grade, social studies, that teachers are doing similar things. That doesn't mean that that's sufficient and it's okay. But I do think they are two different things that work together. So I do think what you're asking for is about the materials themselves that we purchase to implement the curriculum. The curriculum, you're right, it's not going to change on a regular basis. But part of the strategic plan is to get the curriculum written, get it published, and then develop a revision timeline that is consistent, that we can point to. This year, science and ELA are up. Next year, VPA and physical, PE and health are up, so that we don't get into this position again of sort of being in a place. And I wish Teresa were here, because I think we could probably come up with a very quick list of when you've been updated on materials that have been purchased. I'll give you one example. Increasing phonetic awareness and the teaching of phonics at our early grades. UFly was a curriculum that we implemented. There was instructional materials that we implemented that you were given lots of reporting on. Mm-hmm. Second Step is another one that was implemented that there was lots of reporting on. And I know, Anthony, you've asked for access to that. I told you when Teresa came back, Teresa's out. So some of this is delayed for things that are out of our control, right? So though I feel like I don't do good thinking off the top of my head. If Teresa here, she'd be like, Carrie, I did these blah, 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 blah. She'd make the list. And in fact, I think last year, when I remember Kim Fuller at TPS presenting her end of year data, it was about the success of UFly and the phonics instruction that was happening at the early grades. So you are getting informed of that, whether or not it's a written report, and a list of everything, but it is being informed. That is the primary purpose of Teresa's reports to the board, is to do that. So I just, as a reminder of that, that doesn't mean that, we couldn't try to make it a little bit more formal, but I am trying to balance. I think the policy stuff that has happened this year has taken more than just Teresa in terms of staff to be able to support. So I think that's another consideration. It's required both Teresa and I to sort of to work on. So in terms of where we're putting our time and energy, I think that's a consideration as well.
I think Ashley, I thought.
I thought Ashley too.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will put forward a motion to make an amendment.
Okay.
I'm going to use my language, I'm going to make it at least annually for a report of curriculum materials purchased or instruction materials purchased rather than quarterly.
So this is a statement after,
On
The
page
third
1.
paragraph on page 1, or the last paragraph on page 1.
Yeah.
just repeat it again if you don't mind.
At least annually, the superintendent will report to the board a list of and reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, and rejected.
Okay, are you clear on that?
Whenever we say superintendent, is it usually understood that it's superintendent or her designee, right?
I think so.
That would be my,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, is that general
Teresa would report on
agreement?
that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, but is
yes.
that, if we say superintendent, does it usually mean?
I feel that
At
way.
least
Yeah, yeah.
annually,
Okay, I just want to make sure
at
that.
least.
Is there a second on this motion by Ashley? Kyle, is a second. Okay, so discussion around this specifically. Any further discussion around this?
Do you feel like you got all of it? Because I don't.
Under selection of instructional materials, at least annually, the superintendent will report to the board a list of and reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, or rejected.
And that's to replace the last sentence?
No, in addition to it, so after it.
Okay.
I'll go. In a normal world, I would want to table this discussion so that we could have it reviewed by administration and we could talk about what the implications were after thought. I do not want this policy to continue to be hanging over us over a break and into next year, and I'm not so sure we want to be scheduling more meetings on this, frankly. So I'm a little bit torn, I'm gonna say that right now. It feels benign enough that I don't think that this is a major workload thing, meaning like I think the information reporting seems like something we should have, but I'm afraid of creating a situation that is burdensome in some way or that we can't live up to for some reason, and I don't know why, because I'm not the superintendent nor someone that reports this information. Go ahead, Jamie.
Would it be helpful? It seems appropriate that we should end the last meeting of the year the same way we ended last year, which would be,
Refer something to the policy committee.
that's what I was about to say. We could refer IGA to the policy committee to review with this wording being considered within that policy.
Can you explain that process to me?
Right, well, that's how we got here with IJJ.
That's how we got here with IJJ. Take us another year.
The end of the year last year, we referred policy IJJ back for review to look at language, and it's taken us a long time, but we've obviously been very thorough with it. I think the argument here that Jamie's trying to make, and I don't know the answer, but it sounds like Jamie feels this language is better suited for a different policy as opposed to this one. And we could perhaps review that policy. We could direct the policy committee to review that policy and consider this language along with it.
Are we able to set a deadline? Is that something the board's able to do?
Nope.
Well, I mean.
I'm still waiting on a couple I asked about reversal.
I
I haven't forgotten you.
There's a-
Jamie was very quick to
There's a
say
way
no,
through
but
some
we
of these
absolutely could put a deadline
Whoa.
on it.
So, yeah, so let me just offer some thoughts.
We could.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Good.
I will offer some thoughts. There is a long list of policies that we have not touched for months because all we have done is IJJ.
Yep.
Teresa and I have been keeping a list of policies that we don't have that we need, policies that have to be updated. My favorite that you're all gonna love to hear is that the regulations for the Title IX have been completely changed by the federal government. So that fund policy that took us multiple weeks to talk about is gonna have to get talked about again. Teresa's and my priorities are not necessarily gonna be your priorities, and that's fine. But we will provide you with our recommendation, and we have a list of things that we think are really, really essential. One of which has to do with technology use in schools and devices and cell phones and the impact on students and learning. And that is gonna be that's been on our priority list. Like Evan Shaw put that on my list in January. And I've been like, yeah, Evan, maybe we'll get to that next year. So I'm just gonna say, I have people telling me we have things that have to get done, and so it's just gonna be a matter of picking and choosing.
Ashley?
I guess given that, I feel like it's a relatively smaller request, and if it's something that we think we were already gonna put another policy in their support for, I don't see the need to kick it down the line, and I'd like to keep it as an amendment for this one.
Do you, I would want to hear administration be okay with it before I felt okay with it as well, and I don't know where you stand with this right now. Gary?
I can't give an answer. I would have to sit with Teresa and like think about what this could look like. I can't do that, like off the top of my head.
A clarifying question, because Ashley and I are both new. If Ashley were to, like, if we were to go through and continue with the wording that she has put in for this amendment, could we pull it back after we've had a chance to really hear back from Teresa to then do like a quick amendment change, like in the future, if we felt like this was going to be undue hardship, to have it with that specific timeline? Could we then, like later on, pull this back out like early in the fall or something?
So-
Right, to like change the wording of this line,
We could.
if need be. I'm just wondering, like, what's the protocol around, like, if we do something tonight, whatever we do, right? How long does it have to like sort of sit in the vault of policies before you
I have
pull
an
it back
Go
out?
right ahead.
I have an idea. How about we will, similar to what we did with IJJ, we implemented a test procedure this year before the policy was ever approved. So that procedure is now in here.
Yeah.
So Teresa and I can work on what an annual report might look like and do that at some point next year, like once we have our head around it. Because I'm already thinking about the process that was implemented to select literacy materials for grades K to 5. We reported to you that we've received a grant to purchase new literacy materials that addressed some gaps in the curriculum that we've been using. So I think, and in that specific example, they looked at a bunch of curriculum, made some decisions about what they didn't want, what they did want. It almost fits perfectly, I think, with what you're asking. I just don't know if what you're asking would include other things like individual books, things, you know what I mean, that I think could be like a really massive task. So I think that would be a
So
possibility.
what I'm hearing you say is, let's try to start doing it in practice, and if we feel that it's working, we can codify it in policy later. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
I think that's one option.
Okay.
Peter, would you have a thought on that?
Well, can I just finish mine?
Yeah.
Because I was just wondering, like, put the wording in, and then as IGA, are those the letters, Jamie? As that were to come up in the list, like, would we be able to come back to this and say, yeah, we do think it's in IGA, could we pull it from this? But like, it could go in for now to hold place for it or something, like, how easy is it to go back and pull something out?
So we revised policy, there's 2 readings, right?
Right.
So if we all are like, we've put IJJC on now, we've had the longest meetings of our entire
Yes.
year, I think for several years now. Can't think of a time when we've gone back-to-back 11 o'clocks in recent history for a while. So how easy is it? Well, it depends on how much people want to talk about it and
Right,
how
right.
much rigor it gets put back into it, but it would require it to come back to the board for multiple readings to do any
right.
changes in the future. So it could be super easy, like some policies just fly through. Maybe we can put it right in the consent agenda and not even talk about it, right?
Right.
But I don't know, right?
Right.
It depends. So
Okay.
that's how difficult, like, it is to predict.
Okay.
But that's the alternative, I think, to what Carrie just said, is we would put it in the policy and maybe we take it out later. Or we try it and maybe we put it in later, right? I mean, I think those are the 2 things we basically just talked about. Jamie?
Can you remind me, I think we have in the past done this, where administration has, for lack of a better term, made a promise within the minutes to make an annual practice of giving us a report, right? We've done this before.
Well, that's in the strategic plan, that
Right.
there'll be an annual data report, so that's in the strategic plan. It's
So-
not just the minutes.
So this wouldn't be, because in my mind, I remember doing this before, and I can't remember what it was about. Oh, I do. So that would be enough for me, is what I'm trying to say, is like having an annual report, and see how that works. If it works well, codify. That would be my choice.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't-
sorry, no, wait, Peter, I told you.
Let Anthony go.
Okay.
I really don't think it's a big deal. The current wording just says, the superintendent is expected to keep the board informed about educational materials purchased for the school unit. That's just a little vague, and I think what Ashley's asking for is it will be no less than once a year. We're not talking about full curriculum, we're talking about things purchased that year, and it just seems like it's reasonable oversight. I think that with regard to her other two suggestions.
We only have one, we already have a motion
Just
right
one
now.
motion.
Okay, fine, yep, then.
We actually got into motions now. So.
Peter, did you want to go?
Yeah, I would, I'm nervous about trying to punt something down to other policies. My past experience is it's a great place for policy or slots or concerns to just go die. Because God help me if I try to remember all the things I get wound up about last September. But I'm sure I'll get them going again at some point.
Other people might remember them.
But,
I think I have a
because,
list.
we get a lot of, my concern is like, well, it'll be dealt with, and then something comes up. IJJ became a bigger, so forth. So if it's something that you feel we ought to look into, which it does, then, if it relates to purchasing, which your request was for, then it does fit into this policy, because this is about purchasing curriculum, or purchasing so forth, or materials for curriculum. So it does fit here. So I guess I'm very nervous about punting. To answer your question, it can be done in 2 meetings.
Yeah, I just
So
was
it
curious
can be
to
done
know.
very quickly. When we had issues
One way or
come
the
up,
other.
one of them might have been around I'm saying the wrong word, but the police officer. But the police officer was done very quickly. So it can be done very quickly.
Yes.
So if there is, all of a sudden this becomes a nightmare that is not going to be able to be accomplished, it can be passed down to us and we say, hey, and we can deal with it quick as a little.
Yeah.
So.
I very much agree with Anthony that the last sentence here, the superintendent is expected to keep the board informed about educational materials purchased for the school unit. Clearly says she's supposed to be keeping us informed. And I think you're asking for more specificity on that. When, how much, specific things. I think I'm nervous about prescribing that just because of some of the same reservations I've already said, because of unintended consequences, and I feel much better. I'm willing to bet the superintendent has heard you at this point, that more reporting, or more formal reporting, frankly, I think this year has been an odd one because Teresa's been out so much, and so many other things have been going on. But I think we should let the superintendent actually start reporting. And if the reports are sufficient, then maybe we codify that. Or if they're insufficient, then we can prescribe them to be better. But I think we should at least, I don't think any of us really know the best way to report that right now, and it may be different from year to year. And I'm saying I certainly don't, and that's where I'm struggling with prescribing exactly what time frame and exactly what the report needs to contain.
Could I have the motion restated, please?
Amend the policy to add under selection of instructional materials, at least annually, the superintendent will report to the board a list of reasoning for all instructional materials requested for purchase, approved, or rejected. Excuse me.
Does anyone have anything else they want to add to this? Ashley?
If we were to move forward with a pilot report, is there a commitment that it could be by the end of the school year, calendar school year,
Next year?
2025.
Oh, we'd be reporting in the fall, because we're gonna be, we will be purchasing reading materials for K-5 reading. You'll have a report in the fall on that.
So I think the difference, right, what we're talking about is like, I almost feel like the amendment is asking for one uniform summary of everything.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
And you're
okay,
talking
okay.
about,
Oh,
as it's
okay.
coming, you're keeping us informed, but it's
Oh.
not necessarily like the year in review. of
Oh,
curriculum.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That, which I believe is what you're getting at.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean,
misunderstood.
it's at least once per year, right?
Yeah, the expectation
So-
would be the easiest would be at the end of the year, because
So
you would
if-
want to update mid.
if-
Yes,
I don't mean to
100%.
talk out of turn.
Go ahead.
So again, it does not specify the form of that. It just says we want this at least once a year. So if you do it once a year, you're gonna have the full year in review. If you do it by dribs and drabs, as things happen, and it has a certain, you adopt a particular kind of format for it, it should be very simple. And it just kind of fulfills itself. This is just codifying.
And what is the ramification if, because we're busy, or because something happens, that a drib does not drab, and we are not informed of everything 100%? Because I believe that was an all-inclusive statement, that every single thing, period, must be reported.
Yeah, I think the purpose of having it in policy is so that way it does get made, you need a priority
As
item.
opposed
that's
to,
involved.
as opposed to highlights, or, I think that's the potential downfall of this is, I'm sure it wouldn't be purposeful, but with a lot going on, it can be hard, I'd imagine, to put it all out there.
So I just want to clarify, because you talked about programs and that books for individual classrooms wouldn't necessarily, like, just the, you know what I mean, like ninth grade English as a
Right,
text, or,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
I wouldn't think that. That's not, would be my request, someone else wants to make that, that's not my request.
What is specifically what are you looking for?
So program purchases, so this is
Okay.
Atlas, so if there's other programs that are being purchased, if there's changes to that curriculum that they're adopting, that are being purchased through the selection of materials, that's what I would want to see.
So do I need to amend the wording of the amendment to make that clear?
I think my wording is clear. All instructional materials.
So that's much broader than programs, because programs don't get purchased very often.
So if you want to know what the textbooks are, if you want to know what books that the English department is having them read,
Right.
That's a different,
That would be considered instructional material.
Yeah, that's
That's
all
a-
instructional materials.
so I guess the question would then go, what would you be looking for to have for information?
Could it be instructional programs requested for purchase approved or rejected?
I think if it's not that there's a lot of information that could potentially be wrapped up in it, and I would be open to a pilot report and adopt it and add things to it. We receive a report and say, no, I think we want to see this with it. That sounds like at this point, that's probably going to be the most feasible way to do it.
Can I just ask, are you thinking, just so we can get the pilot program, what would make you comfortable? What are you looking for, say, in English? Are you looking to know what's being assigned for books, or?
So in a ninth grade English class, yeah, I guess I would want to see that. Do I want to see what books are being purchased in second grade? No, I guess not. So I think that's where I would guess leave it to Carrie and the administration to put together a report they think the board's going to find useful. And we can read through it and then give feedback on different things we all would want to see in it.
The way I interpret what Ashley's looking for would be, when new things are purchased, they are proposed to administration or the principal, and, in that, there must be a list of some sort of material. And this, I guess, would just be a summary. If you've got, 1 week was 4 books, 1 week was 5, it's just, hey, these are the books. I don't necessarily, myself, need like a synopsis of the who, what, why, where, when. It would just be, hey, these were put forth in this process, these were brought to us for approval. And here they are. You know, I guess that would be my interpretation of it. You know, I don't think it needs to be super involved. I assume most of that happens electronically.
It's just not all in one place.
Right, and it might just be the matter of putting it in a spreadsheet, you know, hey, second grade teacher in green said they want to buy these books, put it over here. And then, you know, I don't know, pick a period that's feasible and makes sense, but say, hey, these are books that were brought to us this month. And
I just want to ask the question maybe, and that is like, what do we expect to do with this information?
Yes.
There's a
I think
lot
it's
of
just
information.
a transparency thing, I guess.
Transparency.
And it sounds like Atlas might achieve that. But,
That's the intention.
yeah, but that's maybe 2 years away.
Would Atlas give you what is being read?
Not necessarily, not necessarily.
But if there were assignments in regards to what is being read, those would show up on Atlas.
Yes, they may not be in the public-facing part, though, because then you get into the issue of, like, if an assessment is available for parents to look at, then kids, like, everybody will see the
everyone can
test
see the
before.
test.
So I think it's, you know what I mean, like, that's gonna be the piece where not all of that may be. I mean, board members may review that in the approval of it, but whether or not individual parents would be able to see that, certainly you can request that. But you wouldn't want to publish every assessment that kids are going to do, because then everybody would know all of the tests before they're given, so.
But I can see where we should be, and I was hoping it was being taken care of in some of this earlier stuff, but maybe, it sounds like it isn't. Is there a way for the general public or parents to know what is available and being used for reading in the classrooms?
It's, so I'm not going to speak for Teresa, right? So if there's a list of potential texts that could be read, I assume that would be there, but again, we haven't built this yet. We're in the process, so. I think that, yeah.
Go ahead, Ashley.
It sounds like there's a lot of interest, not just me, in wanting to see something. So I would be comfortable having Carrie kind of look through her instruction materials that they're purchasing, requesting throughout the year, working with her team to put together a report when it comes time that she thinks the board will find useful. And at that point, the board, everyone would be able to provide feedback for what either they want to see improved, enhanced, added, removed, etc. And then at that point, move forward.
Curriculum is a big issue. Transparency is a big issue. I don't think we're going to solve it tonight. And I think our strategic plan recognizes it as a big issue. I think the sentiment tonight is echoing how big of an issue it is. And I think even in conversations, we know we have a lot of work to do on curriculum next year. So I don't think, again, I'm just very hesitant to make another sweeping statement in here to try to solve some of that. I think, but I really do like the idea of piloting this testing, and especially if that's where you feel that we can go, Ashley. I think we let this go for another year, observe more of how the reporting is occurring and how Atlas is starting to function. And if we are not getting appropriate reports, because it's not like we're not supposed to be being reported to. We're being told, we already have it in policy, the superintendent is required to keep us informed. We're talking about how she should keep us informed. We haven't really even, I think, had a good chance to be informed because of the state of our curriculum right now, and because of some of Teresa's absences, because of some of the other things we've been focusing on. And I think, though, we are going to see, a significant difference in curriculum over the next year or two. That is, all those wheels are already in motion, right? So I'd like to see that play out before we start asking for real specifics on how that information comes to us at this point. So. Good.
Yeah, so I'll agree to remove the amendment, but I don't want to just say, we're just going to let it go for a year. I didn't really like that verbiage. But if we agreed that to work towards a pilot report for what I'm requesting and not having it in here, I would be okay with that if that's the agreement that we're at.
So why don't we, well, I was just going to say, if you're willing to do, if that's something you'd like to do, I think we still requires board action, I would say, to
No,
do.
you can just remove a second.
Yeah, I'm just gonna remove my
Right,
second.
but I think if you want to have a formal pilot project on this, right? You know, I mean, we could just handshake that right now, but there's a lot of times that, you know, I think something as significant as, I think what you're saying, if you don't want to just let it go and see how it goes, if you want something specific, then we should take a board action to make that happen.
Because it's
Great.
very helpful for me. Like, it's harder for me when individual board members ask for something.
Yes.
It's much easier for me when the full board wants me to do something and then I
Yes.
can do it. So,
Yep.
but having individual people say, I want this, I want that, that is when things start to go off the rails.
Correct. So I think pulling the amendment is easy, but I think now we need to come up with the amendment language of the direction we actually want to see happen.
Would it be amendment or just a separate motion?
It almost is like something well, that's just what I'm struggling with here, because it's not really an amendment to this policy.
Correct.
Well, unless,
I don't think, let's just slide it in as an official motion. Can we do that?
yeah, we can add it,
9
let's
point-
just add it to the agenda
Yeah.
after we talked about this?
Right.
Okay. So let's agree to do that.
Okay.
We got an hour till we have to vote on keep extending things, just
Do it.
as a reminder.
Let's keep going. Keep going.
Kyle,
I'd like to retract my
second?
second
Okay,
to Ashley's amendment.
Thank you.
Bree,
Move on.
move on to, well,
Something
Yeah.
else, if we're gonna be done
Well, I
with
would
that
like,
one.
how about Ashley's other point?
I actually had another
other one.
point, and I think,
Sorry.
I think we should,
Well, I mean, I was gonna make an amendment to this policy. I'm not moving on away from.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
Ashley
if we're
Ashley
taking
still
an
has an
amendment.
amendment point I think you want to make about legal counsel consultation.
Yeah, I was gonna make that one.
You were
Move
gonna
on.
make it. Okay,
I'll
okay.
leave it.
It's
Go
okay.
ahead. Go ahead,
You
Bree.
can go back to it if you want to. but
Anyone can.
Just wanted to keep the truck moving here.
Yes.
So Ashley, if you wanna make it as
Yeah, so
started,
I'll
that's
make
fine.
an amendment to remove shall ask the superintendent to consult legal counsel for advice concerning any questions involving freedom of speech or expression, and replace it with, and this is in both areas, section E and F, the superintendent may consult legal counsel for advice at their discretion.
Second, does that cover what
Yeah, so that
Anthony
covers
brought
both
up?
paragraphs, E and H.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just get some clarification on? So you have said the committee should generally be neutral toward viewpoints expressed in materials, and are we changing that shall then to may?
So after materials, it would just be a period.
Okay.
What section is this?
Okay.
You
Page 5.
want to end the
Okay, thank you.
sentence?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the new sentence would just be the superintendent may consult legal counsel for advice at their discretion.
This is in G.
In E.
Where are we?
Just.
Page 5. Page 5. At the top, in section E.
I've got the period, and I've got the strike and shall ask, starting with the superintendent, but then what is it? What's the sentence? The superintendent.
May
what?
consult
May
legal
consult.
counsel at
May.
their discretion.
Yeah.
So
For
get rid of the
advice
two.
at
For
their-
advice, for counsel.
For advice at their
advice.
discretion.
For advice.
I
At-
missed for advice, I got it.
The for advice is already in
At their
there.
discretion.
Oh,
Yeah, so I guess.
Removing the freedom of speech or expression language.
Yeah, and then and then paragraph H, Gabby, when you're ready.
oh,
No,
Sure.
you were,
G, I think.
it's G.
Yeah, so the legal's referred to twice in here.
Yeah, but it's G. I
Yeah, E
think
and
I'm
G.
looking at an older one.
I am,
The
I'm
one
looking at the
that-
ones I made notes on, sorry
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. It's fine, it's G.
Just tell me what I'm striking. G.
This sentence.
The board
Or
shall be
Gabby.
neutral. Are you putting again the period there?
So we can leave that as a
Or-
comma, and instead of and shall consult legal consult
may.
for advice, may consult legal counsel for advice.
And do you want at their
At their
discretion or?
discretion. Yeah.
So that's about the board consulting legal counsel.
Yeah. So in both instances, the superintendent and the board may at their discretion, but it's not a full requirement.
Not required.
Yeah.
I second that. Did she have a second to it yet?
I think Peter
Yeah.
seconded
Well, I
that,
don't
didn't
care.
But we're clear now on language. I think I am. Are you clear, Gabby?
I'm clear on what should go there.
What?
I believe Carrie has what should be stricken, I think.
I have the E. So for
Should be
G,
struck.
it is, are we just changing shall to may on that last sentence?
Yeah.
In G?
Well, there was also a desire to add at discretion too.
At discretion.
So-
At their discretion.
At their discretion.
I feel like may implies the discretion. I don't
That's
know
fine.
though, I don't know if other people feel that way too.
Doesn't, either way, it's just
Yeah.
Me,
no,
there's one.
doubling down on the
Double it
discretion. that's all.
down. Double up.
I know,
Paragraph
this
G,
one is
change
saying-
shall to may, consult legal counsel at their discretion.
Hold on.
Sorry.
We're clear?
Yes?
And there's a second? Who's the second?
Bree?
Oh, so these are two separate
I took it
motions?
over.
No.
It's one
There's
motion.
one motion.
Two changes.
Yeah, okay.
And one amendment. So
I
we're
thought-
amending E and we're amending G.
I thought Peter seconded, so.
Was Peter's the second? Okay, we're discussing it.
Yeah, Peter's the second.
Anthony.
Thank you. I think this is a good idea. However, I think the one under item E, I actually think that this, I think it should say that the committee should be generally neutral toward viewpoints expressed in materials and shall be given legal guidance. And the reason that I say that, and that's different from consulting legal counsel. I firmly believe that we should get written legal guidance on something like this. It should be something that we can then share with every single committee. Because there's no need to bring them on for another consultation every single time when they're going to say the same thing. I would expect that whatever that written opinion is something that is thorough and that really explains what the rights are of the school administrative district to remove materials and what some of the risks are. But this kind of written opinion, I am made to understand is standard with my town. When they get a legal opinion, it's not just the consultation, they get a letter from the lawyer. And they can refer to that whenever they want to. So I would propose an amendment that it say that they shall be given.
So you're amending Ashley's amendment?
Yes.
This is very challenging.
I really was joking about the 11 o'clock thing until now.
Well, that's,
Until now.
I actually have to pretty soon.
I know.
We're gonna have to
yeah.
press the button in a couple
Yeah.
minutes. Okay, so let's understand the amendment 100%, with your specifically amending and specifically putting in for language before we start discussing it.
Well, there needs to be a second of that as well,
Yes,
right?
but I don't even know what
Right,
it
so,
is.
so the motion is, the sentence be reworded to say, the committee should generally be neutral toward viewpoints expressed in materials and shall be given.
So
you're just-
we have
it's
a
a
motion on the
brand
floor
new
right
thing.
now with language already altering this statement, and you're trying to alter the statement that exists in the policy. So are you trying to strike Ashley's amendment to those statements?
To that-
And replace
to that,
new
yes,
statements?
yes.
Okay, so
Isn't that just a new motion?
No.
Okay.
it could be.
it could be, but it's not how it's happening. So-
All right, I will withdraw the motion. We can vote on this as it is, and then we can
Okay.
we can make a
I
second.
think that is simpler,
right.
if you don't mind. So, go ahead.
So I actually, for that first one, so what's interesting is that I didn't fully appreciate that this is in the current policy. And we did not do that last year. Like, legal counsel wasn't consulted at this stage. So I think the May is totally appropriate because we didn't even do it then. It didn't even occur to me to do that. I do not recommend that the board make legal counsel optional. I do not. I think it's not a good idea. So that's all I have for thoughts.
So,
To make it, sorry.
optional for the superintendent, but not the board.
Yeah,
is your
at the
recommendation.
community level, May is, I think, given that we didn't even do it last time, like, I think if questions came up amongst the committee and they thought they needed some kind of legal guidance, that's the May, right? Somebody's asking questions. So I think you can make it optional at that direction. I think for something as significant as removing material from the school curriculum or the library, I think to make consulting legal counsel optional is a risk that is not necessary.
Peter.
I am going to very much vote in favor of this because I feel that if we feel the issue that has come up that we need to talk about, and if we need to talk to legal counsel, we will. And this gives us permission. I do not feel in any form or fashion on any policy that we should be required to talk to legal counsel if we feel we don't need to. I have no interest to give them $1,000 just to tell them what our common sense is telling us right off the get-go. So I very much do not want to limit our ability to talk to them if we feel we need to. And this does not do that. If there is a question that 2 or 3 of us have, then we'll probably go to legal counsel. But if all 9 of us feel that it's the right move to make and we're adults, I don't need another adult to agree with me give them a check. So I would very much agree with this.
Bree.
This is not a new motion. I just want to tighten up. So if Ashley is in agreement, I would like to see E and G with the same punctuation and mirroring language, because in G, it says the board shall be neutral toward viewpoints expressed in materials and may consult, like, and those are like two different ideas, right? Like, they're gonna be neutral, that's in their discussion time. Then they consult if they want to, and that's like a separate thing. So that should be, as you have put it in the first part, a period, and then you said the superintendent may consult legal. So down here, if you are open to it, putting the period after materials just as you have done, and then say the board may, whereas here was the superintendent.
Yeah.
Just to mirror so that it's.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm the second, so
You're the
no.
second, are you?
I insist on having bad grammar.
Grammatically.
I insist on
Right
it.
there.
Okay.
Yes, I'll change my second, if I'm the official second. I don't know who the second is.
Okay.
So it'd be a period, both places after the word materials, and then adding in G, the board, instead of saying and,
Okay.
just for uniformity sake.
Jamie.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm ready to vote on this as long as I can ask Carrie a quick question. Peter said, so if 2 or 3 of us wanted to consult with legal, we would be able to, because it says may consult. Is that something that would happen? Like, we could get legal advice if one of us had a concern about.
In general, that would be a board action.
The-
So if each of you call me and say, I want legal advice on this, I'm like, we can't do that, right? Like it's sort of like each person asking me for something and there's not a board directive. So if the board wants to consult legal, then the board would need to make that, like the board would need to take action to consult legal, which is what you did the last meeting.
And that was what my thinking was. When I said 2 or 3, I didn't mean, I assume if 2 or 3 of us wanted to talk to the board, I'm going by just the goodwill of the board that would probably vote that or agree as a board that we need to talk to legal.
But I think we proved that not to be true at the last meeting, right?
3/5 of the board would need to
Right.
see, would need
Right.
legal.
Then so 3/5 have to do it.
I don't think that that's quite fair. There would be different ways to consult with legal. It did not have to happen in that executive session. So I would not want to be characterized that way.
So what board action would be required? Just like,
Well, I think when we got it, you all got a written legal guidance last year around the implementation of one of the policies around the board chair and public comment, correct? And that, you got a written legal guidance that was reviewed and read and discussed in executive session. And remains a confidential document because it was provided to the board as legal counsel. So that would require 3/5 as well, because you went into executive session to read it and review it and talk about it. So that would require executive session as well.
okay.
Is this germane to the amendment?
I simply disagree that it
We
would have to
can-
be.
I think that will come in the
executive session.
discussion when we get to your amendment. So, are we ready to take a vote here on Ashley's amendment? Okay. Is it worth reading again to make sure we're all clear, or does everyone understand? Okay, I think we all understand. All those in favor of Ashley's amendment, floor? All those opposed? That's 2. The motion passes, so the amendment is now incorporated. I think it's worth entertaining a 5-minute break for people to get a drink, to use the restroom, to restart the owl, and we can return to discussion. Can I get a motion for that
I make that
recess?
motion.
Seconded by Kyle. All those in favor? Okay.
16.
We'll be back in 5 minutes. So we are back after our 5-minute recess. As we move forward here, I feel compelled to say something, and that is that beginning of this year, we held a workshop where we set goals of efficiency. We specifically sat back and talked about when we were being efficient making policy and we weren't being efficient making policy. When we weren't being efficient was when at the last minute we were making a bunch of wording changes on the spot to try to make something happen. And when we were efficient was when it came out early in the process. We gave it thorough review, thoughtful care, consulted with staff, and came back and talked about it later. And the goal was to try to put these things into subcommittee to work on, have them come back, then maybe we're still talking about it first reading. What I'm struck with right now is what's happening is that we're trying to do major changes to a policy on the second reading at the last minute of the last meeting of the year. And I know there are members here that are new that weren't part of the goal-making process earlier in the year. And I know there are folks that got very tired during the first reading and that we've done a lot in subcommittee. But I just want to put that out there, that just how inefficient it actually is for us to try to sit here at the end of the second reading, bringing up new ideas for the first time and trying to implement them with just the precise wording. It's just not good use of our time. And we don't get good consultation, and I don't think it makes good policy. So, after saying that, let's move on. We currently have 2 amendments, I believe. You correct me if I'm wrong. I think the amendment that I had proposed earlier was approved. The most recent amendment that Ashley made was approved to the second reading of IJJC. We are now still discussing IJJC. Is there further discussion to be had? Yes, Anthony.
All right. You guys are not going to like me, but I would like to make a motion to amend page 2 of 6 item L, so that it again say, or sexually explicit. And,
Is there a second to that?
right.
What's the exact wording here?
So that L says, not to be obscene or sexually explicit.
And not using the language you take into consideration.
That one was.
Correct.
So we just- which was the-
Okay.
So he wants to add what was.
Let's be very, I just want to repeat that one more time. What are you proposing, Anthony?
That item L read, not be obscene or sexually explicit.
Is there a second to that? Is there any further discussion around that? Anthony?
Yes, so, and Joe, I'm making this motion really because of something that you said regarding my questions about the interaction between these amendments. Really what it comes down to with sexually explicit, from my perspective, the objections to it all revolve around the supposed vagueness of the term. And how, oh, because it's too vague, we can't use it. We have a quote from the Supreme Court of the United States that says that's not necessary. And I have a quote from you, Joe, that we've been doing it for years. We have been using the term sexually explicit in policy without any problems for years. Nobody has complained about not understanding what the term means. Nobody has complained that they cannot apply the term to policies that, that can require disciplinary action, right? So if you are in violation of one of these policies, particularly if you're a staff member, it could trigger disciplinary action. And yet, nobody has said, I'm not going to be able to do this disciplinary action with this hypothetical staff member because I don't know what this means. So I go back to the Supreme Court saying you don't need mathematical certainty, and I bring it back to the hundreds of people in this community who requested this and who really, I think, are not getting quite enough attention here. So I don't want to belabor it beyond that. Supreme Court of the United States says something that contradicts the idea that the Supreme Court of the United States would have a hard time dealing with the fact that we use the term sexually explicit.
I feel like you directed that at me in a lot of ways.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to do that, Joe.
I'm not necessarily upset with you for putting the motion out there. Maybe Kyle for seconding it, but not necessarily you for putting it out there.
Almost everything, so.
Yeah, we're aware.
But we've had this discussion a lot, and I don't think that it is fair to characterize the problem with sexually explicit as being vague necessarily. I think the problem that is vague is how Anthony defines sexually explicit. Because I think if we use sexually explicit, the issue is more to do with us disagreeing that things that have explicit sexual material in them aren't what you mean. You mean other things that are sexually explicit. That's the vagary of sexually explicit, is that sexually explicit on its own means something, right? It means that there is explicit sexual material in there. I have highlighted materials that were very important to me in my education that would be defined as sexually explicit. I know that not in Anthony's definition of sexually explicit, but the fact that I would consider them to be, another teacher might consider them to be, there's real ambiguity with what Anthony's definition of sexually explicit is, and that's the ultimate problem here, is not necessarily people don't know what sexually explicit is, but it's the, you know what we mean about the sexually explicit, you know, because that's the hard part of this whole thing. And it's not necessarily the vagaries of the term. And having it overcorrect on our internet policy is different than having it overcorrect on our library policy. Very different things. I don't want to get back to talking about internet policy or any other policy. We should be talking about the curriculum policy or the library policy, and the term sexually explicit is problematic in those policies. Go on, Kyle.
What if we, I'm just kind of, this is to Anthony, instead of using sexually explicit because it is a hard word for us to define, if we use morally offensive in a sexual way?
Again, I mean, whose morals? No, and I just say that, I don't mean to be snide, but
No,
are
I
they
get it.
Christian
I get it.
morals? You know, are they Buddhist morality? What is the morality we're seeking here, right? It could be a lot of different, morality is frankly something that could be debated, but go ahead, Peter.
I apologize to everybody who might have been watching me a little bit, because it's been kind of rude because I've been looking at my phone, but I've been looking at my phone primarily because I keep looking up all the different terminations of obscenity and sexually explicit and some of the court cases and so forth. And what it has showed me is that obscenity, clearly in my mind, will cover most everything we are concerned about. And that there are a slew of court cases that go both ways. So primarily and I'm putting it faithfully in the hands of our people who are making the selections to take into account the morals of the district and what they've heard and are continuing to hear, to make sure that the current obscenities that we are concerned about don't come back into our books and into our libraries. Because clearly, most of the definitions that have been talked about under sexually explicit can be safely covered under obscenity. My concern in regards to the 3-point rule, I've seen numerous places both ways where a lot of courts don't really care, only want it to go local compared to federal, and other people going federal. So we can stand by whichever way we want to go. So I'm still holding my hopes out on obscenity. It is a major increase over where we were last time. And I think if we put any common sense behind it, which I really hope we do, and I'm putting some faith in this one, I do realize, and that it will cover all of those concerns. So I'm not ignoring the 500 people who signed a petition, absolutely. I'm not ignoring my parents. God help me, I'm not ignoring my sister, who has threatened me more than I should probably say publicly. But I do understand where they're coming from. So I feel comfortable that this is, it's not going to take, no matter what words we're going to put, there is still going to be the opportunity for you to see nudity and sexual acts, unless we take all the books out of not all the books, but unless we take the majority of the books out, there's going to be some there. So I don't think we can get rid of that. I think we just have to be able to control our own kids, which this allows us to do, and we have to get rid of the worst of it. So that's where I'm coming from on this.
Before you go, Anthony, okay, before you go, so you've had a lot of chances to talk, and I know this is your
So
issue.
you, Joe?
Yes. I really think on this issue of words in the selection criteria, we have spent an inordinate amount of time on it, and I would really like to give you one more chance to speak, but then move on this amendment. I would really like to do that. And if we don't, I'm going to put it to a floor vote to move on this discussion, okay? Because I think we need to continue to complete this agenda before the end of the night and close our session for the year. And we cannot continue to talk about sexually explicit over and over and over and over and over. Okay? So go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you. I'd like to just, a couple of things. One, is going back to your comment about efficiency. I lament the fact that this policy came to the board in the state that it did. From my perspective, the committee spent precious little time actually crafting this document. We, over the course of well over a year, we did one meeting. And we didn't even use all of the allotted time of that meeting to actually take the superintendent's recommended policy and try to hammer out some compromise. So I do not enjoy feeling pressured by this artificial deadline of getting this done by the end of this meeting. I am responding to the vast majority of people in the communities who I've spoken to, and I also really don't appreciate this being brought down to, oh, Anthony, we don't know what you mean about sexually explicit. It's really about your definition. No, it's not. It's about a collective understanding of a term, because the term is used in society. It is used in policy. It is something that is used by the superintendent and by the faculty and staff. It is used. They use it. And they don't have access to Anthony's brain to be able to say, oh, what does this mean again? And like they peer inside my head. That's not how it works. They have a working definition, and they are able to work it out. It shows that the term works. If you don't pretend that we are incapable of understanding what the word means, or the term. So I absolutely reject the concept that this term is too vague. It's not. The Supreme Court has said that it's not. And we prove, as a district, our teachers prove that they are responsibly able to follow policy and avoid using their computers for any purpose involving sexually explicit content. So if it's possible to do it there, and the community is begging to see it here, it seems to me to be extremely strange that anybody on this board would cling to the idea that, we can't do it, it's too problematic because we cannot understand. And I rest my case.
All right, are we ready to move on a vote to this? Okay. Could someone repeat the amendment that is on the floor?
To amend page 2, item L, to say not be obscene or sexually explicit.
All those in favor of the language change proposed by Anthony? 4. All those opposed? Okay. The amendment does not pass. Any further discussion around IJJC?
Jamie,
Jamie?
can I call the vote on the original motions
Yeah.
that are on the floor?
Unless someone objects, has something they want to say, we can just do that. But does anyone have anything else they'd like to add? Okay. Yes, you have a question?
No, just call the vote.
Yes. All those in favor of IJJC as amended tonight? Raise your hand.
Just me?
No. Sorry.
You paused like you were going to say more.
That is 7. All those opposed? Or 2? Okay. Hey, guys, some awful weird coughing going on out there. We're going to move on to item 8.2, which is the second reading and adoption of Curriculum and Policy Committee recommendation of policy IJJL, selection of library materials, and IJJLE, citizens' request for reconsideration of library material form. Is there a motion on the floor? Crystal, is there a second?
Second.
Peter? Very good. Similar to the last time, before we get into discussion, I would like to put an amendment on the floor. Okay?
You beat me to it.
And that is a motion to amend policy IJJL to delete paragraph L. The selection should be free of obscenity, semicolon, and replace with new language for paragraph L that states, quote, not be obscene, semicolon, and, end quote, as well as add the language, not more than 10 days, to the inspection materials by parents section of the policy as a maximum to the amount of reasonable time. So let me parse this out, okay?
Where is that, Joe?
I'm gonna explain it all right now, okay? The selection should be free of obscenities being replaced by not be obscene, just like we just approved as part of IJJC. The other work that's going on there, there's an and/or statement that is being changed to simply and. Again, simply like, just like IJJC. The second part of that is something we also did to IJJC. We added not more than 10 days to the inspection of materials by parents section as a maximum amount to the reasonable time. You may remember a couple meetings ago when we were talking about time frame around inspection of materials, and we asked the superintendent to put a time frame to that. The time frame that she put into that, which was just in the IJJC we approved, was a not more than 10 days. We did not direct the superintendent to do that for IJJL, but I think it's worth carrying it forward. So I'll repeat the amendment here one more time. It's a motion to amend policy IJJL to delete paragraph L, quote, the selection should be free of obscenity, semicolon, and/or, end quote, and replace with new language for paragraph L that states, quote, not be obscene, semicolon, and, end quote, as well as to add the language, quote, not more than 10 days, end quote, to the inspection of materials by parents section of the policy as a maximum to the amount of reasonable time. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Agreed. Discussion. Anyone? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to amend, raise your hand.
All those in favor?
Kyle, I'm not sure about you.
I'm not sure either, I'm
I've got
still
6.
catching up.
Oh, well,
Because it wasn't clear exactly where you're adding in the not more than 10 days. We're all trying to find that spot.
Okay.
so-
Page 3
Okay.
of 6.
I'll pull the vote back till we are all clear.
Yeah, so it's page 3.
So you see the underlined inspection of materials by parents with opt-out request crossed out?
Right.
So it's like 2/3 the way
Line
down the
4.
page.
Yep.
It may be helpful if you look back to IJJC,
That's what I'm.
You'll see it in bold.
Trying to pull it.
you'll see it in bold on the middle of page 3. It says
Yeah.
not more than 10 days.
That's all, we just need to be on the same page.
Yeah. So you'll see it in bold, not more than 10 days was in IJJC. We're doing the same thing to IJJL.
Because you guys had wanted me to do that in C, but we never talked about it in L, that there wasn't any kind of time frame.
Does anyone have any questions on the implications of the amendment or where the language is? Okay. There is really no discussion and everyone's fully understanding of the amendment. This time I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? That looks like 7.
Anthony voted yes.
Yes.
Yes, Alex? Okay, all those opposed is Alex. There we go. All right.
Wait. 7 or 8?
No,
Eight, okay, sorry.
Sorry, did I say that wrong? Yeah.
No, yeah,
8 to
first
1,
time I
8 to 1 in
counted it.
favor of the
Yeah.
amendment.
Okay.
8 to 1 in favor of the amendment.
Okay.
So it passes. We are still in discussion of IJJL as amended. Is there any further discussion? Bree?
I'm not going to put a motion out, but I just am wondering then, do we change the language about the legal counsel for this one as well?
That's very good. Very good point. I think
Does
consistency.
anyone want to put a motion
I think.
to keep it?
Yeah.
I think Ashley can answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one before that, sorry to break the efficiency.
No, can we do that?
You want to do that one?
Yes.
Silly me.
Yeah,
Keep
I'll
it
do that one
in the
first, but I do
motion,
have
so-
another one.
You can do it after.
Yeah, so I'll make an emotion to make an amendment and make sure that the letters are correct for everyone. And paragraph E and paragraph H
what page, please?
on page 5.
Are we assuming we're just matching
And I'm
if it's the same
sorry,
words?
paragraph E and,
So 5.
And H.
Paragraph E on page 5
and H.
and H on page 5.
Mhm.
And I think we can just say to match the language change in IJJC, correct?
Is there a second to that motion? Kyle, good job.
To be clear for.
That's what I'm here for. Moral support.
Any more discussion around this amendment? Again, I believe, if I recall this correctly, that these are basically adding may statements to the legal consult for both the subcommittee as well as the board. Effectively, that's what we're doing. And it passed previously, so we'll put this to a vote unless I see any further thoughts or discussion. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? 2. Okay, the amendment passes. Further discussion. We now have 2 amendments to IJJL, so further discussion. Yes?
Yes, I have another one. So at the last meeting, Peter proposed some language, but we didn't move
Oh,
forward with
yeah,
it.
my little
Yes,
horrible
opposing
attempt.
viewpoints.
Yeah.
So I thought about it some more, and I agreed with the intent, not necessarily the book one-for-one language. And I also kind of got thinking, you know, it's good to have it in the policy to have opposing viewpoints and different titles in the library, but if they're just in there and they're not really being encouraged necessarily, don't know if that's really fulfilling that objection. I was kind of just thinking of library displays, like they don't, I mean, it's end of school year, so they're not around here, but when they have the different library displays, or there's different topics of the month, and there's different, you know, they put different books out. Adding language to policy G, which is new language adopted.
You mean the selection criteria G?
Yep.
Okay.
To present a balance of opposing sides of controversial issues to enable students to develop a capability for critical analysis, I would like to propose adding language that says both in the library collection and library display of materials. So for example, if we were to, it's November, it's, you know, election month, and we had a display of what was happening in politics, I would expect that display to be similar in opposing viewpoints as of other topics where they're able to have opposing viewpoints. I realize not every topic can, but I would want that to be the expectation.
I am not sure this is the right place for that. Just when I say that, this is about selecting materials to come into the library, not necessarily the activities that are occurring in the library. So there may be a different policy that we'd be talking about for statements like that, but I'm not sure it's this one, just because this one is particular to the materials that were coming in, as opposed to the activities in the library. But that's just my first thought about it. I think, oh, sorry.
Second.
Was that Peter?
That was Peter, yes. Thank you for keeping us honest. I think a lot of us are in agreement with Peter's sentiment about opposing viewpoints and critical thinking. The challenge is putting in a requirement, a specific language about how that occurs. And I've thought about it quite a bit too. I can't think of anything stronger than what we already have, but I applaud you for trying
Yeah.
Try to come up with something
I
else.
have one more, and I don't know if I can
Okay.
throw it in with this and just make it
Well,
one to make it easier.
Oh.
we're on discussion about the current,
Okay.
right?
I think,
Go ahead. Yeah.
where the idea is very, and that same statement should be in a policy somewhere else, because we shouldn't just focus on the library. Library happens to be a place that has some of that, but every teacher's billboards or whatever, I think the concern is to make sure that, so I think if there is an area to add this to, I think if you understand what I'm saying, we might focus on the librarian's particular display, but in this particular one, but that's not the only display in the school. And I agree, unfortunately, that this is about purchasing curriculum, materials. So it's really not the place to address that. So I'm curious where it might be to, again, add that strength or add that extra enforcement to the opposing views stance.
I think, in summary, I think what happens in the library or in classrooms is not what we're talking about tonight. It's just not. I think that we should, so I'm hopeful we can avoid continuing to have a conversation about what teachers are choosing to do in their classrooms tonight. Or librarians tonight. This is just not what we're talking about. So, is there a...
We should get some John first.
Yeah, so does anyone have anything more to add on this? Because this is something you have officially put out for language that has been seconded as an amendment. Is there any more discussion around it? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of Ashley's amendment? All those opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Wait.
All those opposed? All those opposed? Okay.
7? So nobody said yes, is that right?
There were no
That's
yeses.
7
We have
say
7, and so
no.
that must mean we have 2 abstentions.
2 abstentions?
Who's
Peter
abstaining?
and Anthony.
Just raise your hand if you're abstaining, please.
I can take my own vote, correct?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 3 abstentions. I'm sorry that we need to be clear with this. Okay.
So that's 6 no's then, not 7.
Right. And I'm sorry, Alex abstained as well, is that?
No, I had
Who was the third?
Shostak,
Okay,
Shostak.
thank you.
Yeah.
Ricker,
Ricker?
and Mishu.
Got it.
Okay, so we're back. We are now back to IJJL. It has been amended twice. Is there further discussion?
Did you have another one?
I think those are her too.
Yeah, I do have another
another
one,
one,
similar
yeah.
to the request I made in the other one for a report. If you want me to do that now.
Yeah, it's the time, so.
So, similar to that one, this one I think should be easier since they're already doing it, which is a list of what is being requested for purchase, the request to purchase and the rejected. So this seems to me more straightforward since it's already the list is already being constructed and handed to the principal and going to Carrie. I had in here quarterly as I did the other one. That's feedback maybe that was too time cumbersome. I know semi-annually would make more sense, but the same wording I proposed before, at least quarterly or semi-annually, if that works better for the admin team. The superintendent will report to the board a list of and reasoning for all library materials requested for purchase, approved, and rejected. Where is this?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Peter?
Page
Okay.
1.
Can I make a,
I was gonna say-
Page 1,
Sorry.
Let's get through the.
I need the
making
wording,
sure we
but
understand.
at least one
I'd
more
like
time.
her to change her motion,
Yeah,
that's all.
me too.
For the superintendent to report to the board.
You want me to change it now or leave the language?
I just would like purchased and donated.
And join.
Okay.
At least semi-annually, the superintendent will report to the board a list of and reasoning for all library materials donated, requested for purchase, approved, and rejected.
And that is what you seconded, Peter? Okay, so we're
Requested
up.
for purchase.
Requested.
Approved.
And rejected.
Thank you.
We're on to discussion now. My first thought about this is.
Wait, that, Peter seconded it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
I would be supportive of the list coming out of what we've purchased. I think there's a lot of burden and unnecessary action in figuring out what was requested versus what was approved and putting a bunch of rationale together for that. I think it's unnecessary. I think reporting to us on what has come into the library through that process, I think is reasonable, but I feel like micromanaging that process and interaction between the, in this case, the librarian requesting materials and the principal or superintendent not accepting things on that list. It's unclear to me exactly how that interaction happens. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, Carrie, but it feels like, just my first reaction on that is that I perfectly fine seeing the list of materials that are coming into our library, but I don't necessarily need to see the sausage making.
So make the list, you're right, it's can be, that, the reasoning I think would be difficult because that's not in writing anywhere, I don't think, because they're reviewing the collection. I think I have to remind you, we have one librarian in charge of all 4 elementary schools. I think the burden on her would be excessive. Like, I don't see how that's possible to have her go to each library and have that reasoning, but certainly the list, you're right, is created and done. So I think the list itself, I think rejected, I mean, I could provide that to you easily. I think that's not a problem. I think the reasoning part, anything that's going to require them to sort of like write something out, because they're buying, it's hundreds. The list is so long, so I think it's just
I
not
would be-
reasonable.
Yeah, I can see that, so I would strike that and reasoning, and if any member of the board wanted reasoning, they could, on a particular title, they could ask you.
So would,
Whatever she says, I will adjust. my-
Okay, guys, but just can't move that fast. Hold on, let's let Jamie say what she wanted to say. Great, you have your hand
That's what
raised.
I was going to suggest, is that the reasoning for it is too burdensome, so I would strike that. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, Anthony was next, and we'll come to you, Bree.
I think the reasoning is extremely important when material is rejected, because it gives the board a chance to look over something that could potentially be a First Amendment infringement. So I would absolutely support knowing, I think this board should know why something was rejected for its collections. Because it could have, we could say, actually, we think that really belongs in there. So why don't we, as a board, decide to put it back? I'm not saying that that's very likely, but it does put in a safety, like a circuit breaker, that I think could offer us some valuable protections.
Anyone else want to speak to this amendment, Bree?
I think this is getting very wishy-washy now, and so if you put this language in, you are then saying that here's a book that one viewpoint wants to have in the library, now it got rejected by the committee. Well, why did it get rejected? We find that now you're starting to bring up language again saying it has literary value. It fits with my viewpoints, it fits with my morals. It should be in the library, and we are just going to be back where we started with this head-butting back and forth, because now we are saying, like, whatever it may be, whether it is a religious text or a text that you think has some sexually explicit material to it, is just going to be this constant head-butting back and forth now, and it's going to be this wishy-washy of, well, that fit with my morals, well, it didn't fit with this other person's morals, or that fit with... And I just see that this is going to be way more of a headache, and I don't think you guys really realize how much this is going to just be pitting community members against librarians, against us as a board, against the superintendent. Like, it's getting really wishy-washy now at this point, and it's not, I think you are looking at this as this is going to tighten things up, but it's not. That's my opinion.
I just want to pause for a minute
I'm allowed to
and
put it up
put a
there.
motion on the floor that is going to request that we extend our meeting past 10 o'clock.
Second.
I'll make it, and Peter seconds it.
Oh, I
All-
thought you said you
Yeah,
were
it's
putting it
fine.
on.
Yeah, no, if it's, all those in favor of going past 10 o'clock? It's unanimous. Anyone else want to add to what Bree just said, or what Anthony just said? Okay,
I think-
Ashley, you
Go. No,
She
I
raised
thought
her
you were
hand.
looking.
you were ready to make a change.
Yeah, I'm comfortable removing reasoning, and if any particular board member wants to know the reasoning, I think they can ask.
But you still want to see
The
the list of proposed to be purchased and a list of rejected.
Wait, proposed or purchased?
Right, she wants to know
So the
what.
requested list and the
what the-
purchase
She wants to know what the librarian asked for and what the principal or the superintendent rejected.
Along with what was donated.
Right, so what I have in there now is to, at least semi-annually, to have the superintendent report to the board a list of all library materials donated, requested for purchase, approved, and rejected.
And yeah, I've already said what I feel. I don't think the sausage making of that process is valuable. Amy?
Ashley, can I just ask you to clarify? Okay, so requested for purchase, approved for purchase. You want both of those?
Yeah.
And what's the rationale behind that?
So I thought it was interesting to see a list, or a couple titles that were requested, that were denied by the principal. I think that does speak to how well the selection criteria is working on that initial review process. Whenever this is particular policy is reviewed again in the future, which it very well may be, we can take a look back and say, hey, look, there are a lot of books that are being on the request list that are not fitting this selection criteria, that are adding extra work to the principal because he's now rejecting 1, 2, 3, 4, X number of books every month, whatever that may be. Why is the selection criteria not capturing these prior to getting to a review committee, prior to getting to a principal that's requiring rejection? I would like to see that.
Second to my question, is this feasible?
I mean, I can tell you, yes. Have I personally seen like, do I actually know what that looks like? I know that the principals have gotten a list and it's overwhelming. Like, they sort of do an initial approval because it's such a long, there's so many titles. And so it's not until they open it and actually look at all the books. So I'm not sure that's a selection criteria problem as much as until you actually open a book, you can't really know. Like, it doesn't matter what review you read, until you actually open it, you're not gonna know. So I'm not, yeah.
A sense that I'm getting here is we're getting increasingly into we're pushing ourselves into a micromanagement of staff in a lot of ways. The board, I don't think, should be involved with the day-to-day book purchases. I think if we're interested in what's coming into the library, we get a list of what's coming into the library, but I don't think we should necessarily get involved with why the librarian is choosing certain things and why the principal is rejecting certain things. I think those types of things are personnel management that we have the superintendent hired to do, right? If the superintendent feels there's a problem with how the librarian or the principal are enacting policy or doing their jobs, that is the superintendent's role as their supervisor and as our employee to manage that. And I'm worried about overcommitting us as a board to a lot of these, what I perceive to be micromanagement type of requests. And I certainly don't think it is a good idea to get involved in that. Peter?
When it comes down to it, I differentiate between the fact, I was surprised to find out that we purchased the books before we evaluated. So that's where my concern lies. Well,
I was just gonna clarify, they are reviewed prior to. It's not just picking random titles.
I'm aware of,
Okay,
I'm aware of
okay.
that. But the secondary, where we have put our strength, or what we've been told that to help prevent this is in the secondary and third, other eyes looking at it.
Yeah.
Which if I'm not mistaken, as how it was explained earlier, happens after they actually arrive.
So it's two parts. The list is provided to the principals. They review the list first.
Which you just said a couple minutes ago that they usually are overwhelmed by that list.
It's
And
a,
don't-
it's a
and
long
don't really-
list.
And don't really evaluate it until they
I
come
didn't
in.
say that, I don't think. I know that there's been titles where the name of the title, sort of like, Eben's the one who's been doing this all year. He'll see a couple titles and say, give me a little bit more information about that. But it's out of hundreds, so whether or not he picks up every single one, or a title doesn't trigger any question from him. So, and then he says, go ahead and purchase, and then when they come in, we'll look at them.
So that's where Mike, once we go to the purchase point, the district is purchasing the book. So I think that's where it falls into the category of what we've been looking at everything, is or I'm honestly, myself, don't really, but what the public wants to know or have available to them, either via us or some other way, is what is being purchased by the district. So that is where it kind of falls down on how I view it is, we as a district are purchasing these books. If it is a review where there are books not being purchased, then I can see that as a different migrant. But if we are actually spending the money, having them come in, and then deciding whether or not they're gonna make it into the library, which is what happened earlier this year, that's when I think we as a district need to know, or the community has the right to know what those are. So that's all I was, that's where my.
So I just want
line
to
is.
clarify, in all the purchasing done at the high school, 2 books were not put on the shelves.
No, I understand.
So I just, in terms of I just want to make sure that we've got it in
I think
perspective.
you're highlighting it's not a big dollar value.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's
40
it's 2 books, so
But
yeah.
it's still, it's the
40
fact that it's a purchase by the district, by the taxpayers are asking what is being purchased, and I think they have every right to know what's being purchased. And we are their representatives, so we are how that information gets out there for the most part. So that's only reason why I bring it up, is how I look at it. You know, if it wasn't being purchased, that's a different story.
Can we return them?
I don't know.
No, that's what I'm asking Carrie. Can they be returned once we purchase them? We don't want to put them on the shelves. If we return them, is that possible?
Not ask that question.
I mean, does that change your mind, Peter? If we don't actually have, if we purchase them, but we're not going to put them on the shelf so they get returned, there's no fiscal impact at all.
I
It's
realize
just part of the
I
review
realize
process.
most of you are feeling this is a nitpicking thing, but we all have our lines, and this
Yes,
is where I
right,
kind
right.
of.
I think the line is what goes on the shelves. I think nitpicking the decision-making process of our principal and our superintendent or the librarian and the internal discussions they have and judgments they make, I think that, and highlighting those to us to further scrutinize is an unfair process of micromanagement of staff. And I think getting a list of what gets on the shelf seems appropriate, but trying to pretend we're going to analyze a rationale of how our policy is good or bad by the 1 or 2 books that the principal rejects and trying to overanalyze why, I think is false sense of worth to that. And I think it's simply going to feel burdensome to staff and like we're micromanaging them, and it's not supportive. That's my opinion about it. Any further, Jamie?
So what I'm hearing, so that we can move forward, is that it would be feasible and within the interest of members of this board to see what is purchased and what is rejected.
I think that is feasible.
So
I mean, because I could do it this year.
I would.
But although, so yes.
I would
think so. That was
support-
just one school, I think so.
I would support an amendment so that we can see what our district is purchasing and what is rejected. I think that is much more feasible than the entire list where there's 1 or 2, like you said, where that might not be captured. What's important is that we see what's being purchased, what is then being rejected, so that we can then say, why is this being rejected? And that also
Yeah.
does Anthony's concerns as well.
But isn't that what this
I thought
amendment
that's
is?
what
No,
Ashley
but
said.
her initial one is, she also wants to know what was proposed to be purchased.
Or what
and
was
then-
requested for purchase, approved, and rejected.
I can update that and remove the request, what was requested, because I think by seeing what was purchased and what was rejected, inherently you already know what was requested, because it was everything purchased and everything rejected.
You were
So-
sent to a point.
Yeah, so I would, yeah, I would strike that, Gabby, request for purchase to just what's been purchased and rejected for donated, both donated and purchased.
Okay, so,
So,
So
I
just
just want to make sure we're
remove
doing.
request for
I hear you.
purchase.
Let's repeat what you're changing your amendment, right?
Yep, I'll change that. I
And-
will remove request for purchase. So the report would only include donated, approved, and rejected.
I think it's important that you state it fully, because I don't understand what you're saying right now.
At least semi-annually, the superintendent will report to the board a list for all library materials donated, purchased, and rejected.
and will Peter,
It's Peter's, yeah.
I guess,
So I think, the only thing I'm gonna say is, without me talking to the librarians, like, I think this makes sense, but honestly, I don't actually know. Like, I don't know if I talk to them and, like, can you do this? I don't know. It sounds reasonable to me, but I just can't guarantee that it is. Like, I just don't know. And my brain is not working, so I
No.
think it sounds reasonable. I think, I know I could produce a list of what got shelved, like what, new things, like, town libraries do that, like
Right.
new things that are going on the shelf. I'm a little bit nervous that I'm gonna have to come back to you in the fall and say, oh, it doesn't really work this way, because I don't know. I think it does. I don't know.
I think it's very bad to be enacting policy that we don't know what's going to happen. And I think it's an artifact of trying to do it at 10:10 at the last meeting of the year on the second reading of a policy without putting good thought into it. It's just not a good idea to be doing this right now. Go ahead, Anthony.
Surely this can't be that hard. Everything has to be accounted for. There are lists, there are receipts. It's just putting that
It's
information
just work,
together.
right? It's just amount, it's just time. It's
Yeah,
just
Joe-
an amount
Joe-
of
Joe-
time that
Joe,
our administration needs to spend more
Please, I have
time
the
with.
floor, Joe. Please. We're all tired.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought you were done talking, so I was responding, but if you want to keep speaking, go ahead. What was your next point?
The information exists. It should not be difficult to take that information that is already in electronic form and put it into a spreadsheet and just give it to us. I have to run these kinds of reports all the time. It's not that onerous.
I will just add that we ask a lot of our staff. We ask a lot of the superintendent. We ask repeatedly for things that we say are just another little thing, just a little bit more of this, and it's a lot. And I don't think understanding what we're really asking for right now and codifying the policy and approving it is the right thing to do. Period. Jamie?
I'm going to make a motion to do the same exact thing that we did with IJJC and pilot this as a semi-annual report to the board alongside the curriculum.
The curriculum was an annual.
And-
We haven't even got there yet, but that will mean we're going to defer this to another agenda item, which we haven't got to yet, right? We agreed in the, I think it's a good thought, Jamie. It's just a matter of getting there. We can actually get there. Because we decided after we get through these IJJ policies, we're then going to add this pilot discussion to the agenda. So hopefully we can get there.
I just, like you said, I don't think it's smart if
Yeah.
we don't know how this is going to be enacted to
100%
put it
agree.
into a policy.
I 100% agree.
But I think that there's board support to get something like this reported to us, maybe just
Yes.
not in a policy.
Yes, I'm supportive of that. Peter?
this is, number one, we are going to come up with amendments, we're going to come up with changes to what we're discussing, because this is where we think about it the most. If we don't have it ahead of time, that doesn't mean we don't have the ability or the right to try to bring it forward. So I'm going to be worse at that than anybody, because my thoughts revolve around a subject when it's sitting there discussing me, and that's when I start to think about it more than anything. If you want me to write it up ahead of time, God help you, you might get it or you might not. But, so unfortunately, these things take time. And if they're slow, they're slow. That's how it's supposed to be in government, so God help us. And when it comes to this particular one, this is very different than the one we talked about earlier in my mind, because in the first one that we were talking about in regards to whatever, however it is, we're going to come back to it.
Curriculum programs.
Curriculum is a completely different set of data that is going to have to be put together. It's going, it's a very different subject matter. This is something we've actually already got or had available to us. I see, and yes, I understand we still add workload, and we have to adjust the workload as it goes. But I don't see anywhere where this is any significant about. We already have this list printed for the high school. For the elementary school, we already have this list printed for when they want to purchase the books. And I suspect there's not nearly the issue that there is at the high school for a review of them. So I don't foresee, I'm just not seeing where it's more than a couple hours worth of time. And that I'm thinking of being, so that's why I don't foresee it as being necessary to have a pilot on this one. Because if it's something we want, I don't see where it's an issue in making it happen.
Any further discussion around this? Okay, and I guess we're going to move to a vote. Can someone please repeat the amendment that's on the floor right now?
To have at least semi-annually, the superintendent report to the board a list of all library materials donated, purchased, and rejected. Sorry.
Is that accurate? All those in favor?
Okay, wait, I need the names.
Kyle, Ashley, Anthony, Alex, Peter.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Or the amendment carries. So we now have an amended IJJL with 3 separate amendments. Is there any further discussion on IJJL? Okay. All those in favor of IJJL as amended? All those opposed? Carries 7-2. All right, there's no abstentions? I didn't see any? Okay. So we now move on to the deletion of current IJJL. Let me get the exact wording. I will take a motion to delete, for the deletion of policy IJJ, selection of education materials, and IJJE, citizens challenge of educational media form. Someone want to make that motion? Crystal? Second. Bree? Discussion around the deletion of the old IJJ. Anyone want to save it? Let's keep it.
No.
No? All right. All those in favor of deletion? That is unanimous. All right. So what we talked about a few minutes ago was crafting some sort of reporting to pilot this year regarding curriculum materials. Does anyone want to take a stab at what that motion looks like?
I can. I've
Okay.
done the last few, so it's going to be someone else. I'm just going to propose the same language that for the wording of what the report is, and then I'll make a motion to enact a pilot report to be enacted on by the superintendent, at least annually, that the superintendent will report to the board a list for all instructional materials requested for purchase and approved. I guess we can adopt the same, we just did approved and rejected.
I'm sorry, one more time, to enact a pilot report to be enacted at least semi-annually by the superintendent.
Yep, to report to the board a list of all instructional materials approved and rejected.
Thank you.
All right. One more read back of that, is all.
To enact a pilot report to be enacted at least semi-annually.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, at least annually.
Oh, wait, an enactment to a report to be enacted? Is that what I heard?
I'm doing this on the fly.
No, I know, but that's why it's
That
important.
is-
I want to clarify
yeah,
this.
That's what I had. At least annually by the superintendent.
A list of all instructional materials.
To report to the board a list of all instructional materials approved and rejected.
Is there a second to that?
That'd be me.
Kyle?
The kitty table speaks again.
Discussion around this?
Okay, just
Yeah.
a little
go ahead,
clarity.
Karen. Yep.
So,
You're going to have to do it, so it's important that you understand.
yeah, so again, instruction materials or programs?
So I feel like this is where the pilot report comes into play, because Peter called out some different items that, I hadn't thought of when I made the proposal, so. I was envisioning programs when I made the request, after hearing board feedback with some other areas of instruction materials. I guess I would foresee this being, I was looking at programs, but if there are instructional materials that you feel that would be useful to the board to know in the report, I think that would be good to include, and at that time, the board can review the report and make changes if they think it's needed.
So just for clarity, instruction materials, how we purchase those is a much fractured process because it's individual teachers potentially. It may not be like all of fourth grade across the district. And that, unlike the library, which I hope and assume is an easy thing to produce, that would not be. Programs, yes. Something that's purchased for an entire grade level, yes. Something that one teacher's buying but another teacher isn't, that is a whole nother, that would be a very
I think specifically.
major change to our process.
Ashley, she's wanting to know is, what do you feel the program entails? When you're asking for what, you want to know what we're purchasing for a program. What do you think that entails?
Right, so I would say, as Kara said, the program that's being used across the board for fourth grade, if a teacher has a particular item that they're using that's a one-off, I don't think that needs to be included in the report. If a board member wants to know something, they can ask that. But I don't think that's the level of detail I don't think that's really feasible.
Yeah, it's not, what one third grade teacher in Leeds buys and asks to purchase and is different from a third grade teacher in Turner is, that would be a significant burden on principals because they would have to do that. I would not be able to collect that information from them. I would have to have them do that.
Right, yeah, I don't think we want to ask our teachers to do that either.
Yeah, okay.
So programs.
Programs and grade level materials.
Yeah, grade specific.
And then rejected, so I don't think it works the same way. So typically what happens is, and I'll use the new reading program as an example, a committee gets together and they look at 6 different ones, they go and visit, they look at samples. So I'm not sure it's a rejection as much as these are our choices, which one do we want to pick? Because we're not purchasing anything to look at it and then send it back.
Okay, so it'd be more or less a summary of different programs the district was considering and opted not to use.
Am I rewording this?
I'm just getting clarity.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
getting
think
clarity
we
right
should
now.
reword it,
So,
or-
because rejected is just, it just doesn't, it's not the same process. It
Yeah.
really just
I
doesn't.
don't
Right.
think it needs to be reworded, or it's just a pilot report and not enacting a policy.
So am I changing it to a list of all instructional programs and grade level materials, or am I leaving instructional materials?
I would be good on instruction.
Okay, thank you.
Anthony, you raising your hand?
Yes. If it's intended to be a pilot, should the wording not be that we're directing the superintendent to develop and recommend a standardized way of communicating this information to the board? Is that, am I understanding the intent of?
Yeah, I think we're just kind of starting some direction towards that process, right? Because I think the direction of it is a solid way to start, and maybe it gets massaged as we review. I think that was the idea. Yes, Kristen?
May I?
Yeah, of course.
Hi. So I feel very strongly that this feels like micromanagement. I do not like this. To me, getting a list of why something was looked over and giving that to all of us, like Peter and I, you and I might, like math is, I don't like math, but you might be very much a mathematical person. No? Okay. Maybe it should have been really like rigorous for us. But I don't see the benefit in that. I know that I might be somewhere very different than other people. I trust Teresa and our educators, our librarians, our whole system, because that's what you all went to school for. We should not, yes, we approve curriculum, yes, but the people who present that to us have made the best decision for our district and our students. I don't think we need a list. That's just my, and I think that it is a lot of work for you guys, whether it is just what we've approved. I think of, like you were, saying in third grade, like choose love and like other really important things that other teachers aren't using. Those are important things, and I would love to hear more about things that specific classrooms are doing that they're having great successes with. And I think Teresa does a great job of giving you fly, and that's what it's called, right? Yeah, okay. And giving us the information about what is actually going on. And I just think that this is burdensome and not necessary.
Who else? Anthony?
I just like the transparency and accountability that this allows. It lets us see potentially how much things are costing. People ask me questions like that, and I have no idea. So I have no idea what educational materials are being purchased, or if so. Anyway, I just think I like the transparency that it adds. I would not want to make it overly burdensome, but I do think that this kind of reporting is necessary.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think there's a mischaracterization that there's a lack of trust or that it's a micromanagement. I've worked with several boards in a different setting, a business setting, so it is different, but they ask a lot of questions and they want to know, why did you take this route and why not these 5? What were the other 5 options you had and why didn't you do them? And they're hiring the best people for those leadership roles they possibly can because they trust them, but it doesn't mean they're not going to trust or verify and make sure that they're doing their due diligence as a board to know all the options were presented to their team. So I think, insinuating that members of the board don't trust or don't think our teachers are qualified just because they want to know more information, that's simply not the case.
Great.
So again, I'll ask, I think this was asked before, like what are we going to do with said information? It's already being done. And how many times have we pushed back and said, oh, we don't want you fly, etc. Also, as an educator, I know curriculums how many of you are going to go back and say, oh, what's the difference between HMH and Savas? Do you guys know those names?
What is that?
Exactly. Okay? But this is the point. So like when they come and say, okay, these were the curriculums that we looked at and we chose to go with HMH instead of using Savas, are you guys all going to go quick and research now? Why didn't you choose Savas? What's wrong with Savas? Why did you choose HMH? So I don't really see, again, like, I think the transparency is already happening. When the time comes, as Carrie already said, too, things like math, visual and performing arts, health, and phys ed, like, as they come up into their cycles of standards get revised through the state, that's when things like curriculum might start to be looked at, and that's when they're going to update us if that happens, that they're going to be purchasing new curriculum. That's when they let us know. But again, how much do we need to know, like, which one was rejected? Are you going to go look up that curriculum to see why that one was any different or any, like, I think just informing us, this is what we chose, because you need to be able to trust the people, be educators who sit there, like, that's like what I've done. I spend, you spend months, guys. I can just tell you, you spend, as educators who are picking out new curriculum or changing something, you spend months in a committee with multiple people from different grade levels or whoever it might be affecting, looking at and scrutinizing and having checklists of, does it cover these things? Before you even begin to present, this is the one we choose, and have it be accepted. I think it would just be, I don't know that, I do see it as a lack of trust, because you literally are saying, oh, why didn't you choose that one? We spent 5 months or however long on it, and now the board wants to question that decision. That's what it's opening this up to. I think it's already being told to us when it happens, and we certainly can trust it, because they aren't just shooting it a dart in the dark, trying to hit the bullseye.
Carrie, you're next.
So I really think we should vote, because I think we're all very tired and it's the end of June. The policy already asks the superintendent to provide this information to the board. I think there is value in the board understanding the process by which materials were purchased. I think Teresa and I will work on this, and we'll develop something, and we'll see if it works, and we'll see if it provides people with enough information. Probably, I would assume at some point, probably not at the beginning of the year, because we might purchase something after, but most stuff is purchased early on, and then we'll go from there. But I think we should just vote on it. This is just a little bit more clarity to what was in the policy, if people remember, like, how we ended up putting this on the end. So that's what I think we should do right now.
Okay.
And then everybody can go home.
Peter, do you still want to say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, that word again.
I'm feeling I need to defend Ashley a little bit, and the rest of us. We might not have a complete understanding of the different programs and the aspects, but it is our duty to understand what is being taught in the district. It is our responsibility to know what is being chosen. And if we just sit back and go, we'll let them choose, and if they chose it, it has to be right, then we are absolutely not doing what we were elected to do. And if members of the committee or the board wish to know a little more detail, I do not think that that is an insult. And we definitely do not need to be talked down to, but that we do not understand the process. I grew up in an educational world with numerous educators in my family. And I hear all the time that they don't always have a complete understanding of the processes and the programs that they look at. And 9 times out of 10, I personally feel that often we make steps forward that we shouldn't have made in the first place. Because just because it's a new program, we go after it. And I would like to know that as well. Why are we chasing a new program sometimes? Did somebody go to a conference and now let's spend a bunch of money? So I do not think it is an insult I don't think it is appropriate to degrade us for just asking more information. It is our duty to ask that information and to know what it is.
Just to answer Bree's question, yes. I will look it up. I am that kind of guy. I'm curious and I want to know why the people who are doing this work for the district are making the choices that they do. That doesn't mean that I doubt their choices.
All right. Are we ready to put a vote to this? Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Carries. At this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Kyle, second. Alex, all those in favor of adjourning? It's unanimous.